That first journey, that first world, and the faces of his companions as he pushed into the unknown with them. 100 years have slammed by, but he still remembers every detail like it was yesterday. 10 years have already gone by, so in his mind, a peaceful world has to be waiting just beyond these doors. At least, that's what he kept believing. Back then, he believed in it with his whole heart. No doubts, no hesitation, not a single shadow of doubt. The man tells him, "You don't have to show up tomorrow." At first, he thought this was just a day off. Then it hit him like a wrecking ball. Starting tomorrow, nobody would need him anymore. They told him it didn't just happen. People had already planned everything for ages, and they did it without him. The whole team agreed on it, no debate, no takebacks, and now it's locked in, impossible to change. He's left staring in disbelief, because every single one of them swore they'd take down the Demon King together. How on earth could they just brush that promise off so easily? One of the participants slams their point home and swears they're dead serious. No jokes, no changes ever. Once they clocked his talent, they pulled him into the party and everyone lit up at his arrival. He didn't just show up, he stepped in hard, teaching them, backing them up, and boosting the whole team. But lately, everything shifted. He started slacking off, dodging every training session and binging on entertainment. While everyone else surged stronger, he stayed exactly where he began. They still prayed he'd snap back to his senses, but their patience ran bone dry long ago, and now he's finally starting to see the ugly truth of what's really going on. He got kicked out of the hero squad, and just like that, he was stripped of his spot on their team. A suffocating silence slammed into the room, and everyone instantly started dodging eye contact. But just like that, boom, a system message flashes, the condition's been met, and you've got 10 minutes left until everything comes back, and he grins like he owns the countdown. His smile blossoms into a real, bright horror, and the others freeze, stunned. They can't believe Exiled didn't crack his mind, but he swears he's totally sane. His long-awaited wish finally lands. Before he bolts, he swings around and asks permission to leave something behind. A black magic circle rips open right in front of him, and the whole room snaps into an instant, crushing tension. One of the girls spots the symbol instantly, grabs his attention, and demands he stop, because whatever's going on is clearly scaring her to death. Then he drops a book on the table, like that's the whole instruction. She can't help but wonder, did he really have that spatial storage power, and why in the world didn't he say anything before? Then he just smirks and shoves the truth at her. Read this. Inside, you've got training tips, clever ways to sharpen skills, and ruthless lessons pulled straight from past battles. So he's betting this is what'll help them keep leveling up. She raises her hand and tries to remember the magic she's supposed to master, only she can't even name it, while he stares hard at her instructions like he's trying to read the spell through her words. Ed's convinced this magic will wake up as she grows older, so he leaves careful notes packed with explanations, then tells her to reread them anytime. She nods, grateful beyond words. Another guy pores over a twisted map packed with secret hallways and traps even he didn't know were there. He can't wrap his head around how Ed even made something like this, until Ed leans in and drops the truth. The map only charts places that have already been visited. He shoots the idea down. Ed couldn't have seen everything, but then shuts his mouth completely because the truth hits hard. I'm no longer part of the party, and that's all he'll say. A long-haired participant bows and apologizes, and Ed's eyes go wide. Then the hero steps up and admits his guilt with real, heartfelt honesty. He admits he had no idea how much Ed was carrying for them in the shadows, and he wastes no time apologizing for being blind to it. The girl still regrets it, because now she finally sees just how wrong she was, and Ed is losing control, snapping back again and again and refusing to take their apologies. Then another person steps up and admits he's the one who deserved the blame, throwing down a sincere apology while admitting straight up that Ed is completely right. Ed snaps everyone's gaze upward. He didn't want guilt crushing them because they'd been nothing but kind. He just wanted to leave something useful behind before he goes. One of the girls, all choked up, calls him a fool and announces the expulsion is cancelled. Then she fires back, so who else is trying to be a fool and fight it? Regret burning in his chest, the hero blurts out that he's ashamed to even ask Ed to come back after everything. Ed shakes his head and gently refuses. Everyone jumps in shock, and the hero admits it'd feel weird to demand a return right after getting kicked out. but Ed snaps back, insisting it's got nothing to do with that. He's got one burning wish for them, victory over the Demon King, and he's rooting hard for their success. Right when Ed's about to bolt out the door, someone yells at him, demanding he at least stop and say goodbye. But he bolts off at full speed, never once glancing back. 10 seconds left until the return hits, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ed thinks this place is insane in the best way. The transmigration kicks off, then he steps straight into the portal. He's swallowed whole by the blinding glow of the transition. The shift finishes, he steps into a brand new world, then murmurs, "So much time has passed since I was last here." This trip dragged on for a full year, way longer than normal, but he pushed through anyway. At last, he hit the destination, and now it was his time, just like he promised. He stares into his own reflection inside the glassy sphere and blurts, "Take me home." And he stares into the silence again, same old story. No answer, not even at the very end, exactly like he knew it would go. One day, right in the middle of Ed's quiet life as a mercenary, he was yanked by surprise into this strange new place. There sat a white book, deadly blank, no title on the cover, not a single word anywhere. There was just one lone gate, and when he stood in front of it, his mind screamed, "What the hell is this, and what am I supposed to do?" Even with no words of God in sight, he still devoured the book, nonsense or not. It somehow spelled out all kinds of crazy things. Step into a brand new world, win the hero's trust, team up with him for more than 6 months, then boom, you get thrown out. After that, you come back over and over again. It all felt completely absurd until the door swings open and then refuses to reopen, and out of nowhere, a brand new gate appears, dragging you into a fresh world, no explanations, just the jump. This whole cycle drags on for a full century, racing through 100 worlds, then getting kicked out of each one. He kept asking himself if he truly understood what he was walking into, then he did it anyway. So come on, shouldn't they at least celebrate a little now? He points right at the next gate, like he's daring it to stand in his way. God goes silent, Ed drops into a squat and exhales hard, then he clings to one silver lining. Out here, he doesn't age. In those worlds, everything followed the rules, train and you got stronger, eat and you packed on weight, hair even grew, but the second you came back here, it all flipped back, and your body returned to exactly how it looked the very first time you arrived. And now, physically and spiritually, he's back to looking around 20, like time never even touched him. In the span of 100 years, he's torn through 100 worlds and lived 100 lives. In the end, he was just some man stuck with a ridiculously long life. If he went back to his world right now, he'd be a 100-plus-year-old grandfather. But nobody cared anymore, not even the fools, not even his mother. He laughed, and then the laughter died in his throat. That's enough, right? He gave it everything, every last detail. Now God has to keep his promise, take Ed home. A crystal clear sphere ignites and starts to glow. Every time they threw him out of another world, that magic sphere handed him fresh, mind-blowing powers. He personally named it Skills of the Exile. Among the bunch sat the Traveler's Treasure, a storage that could stash items even when worlds changed, plus a map that kept logging every stop he ever made, the Trail of Journey. Then came the Glasses of 7 Flames, able to rip open hidden talents, and finally the Imperfect Counterfeiter, a power that could recreate anything he'd seen, but only after it had burned through his eyes once. It's only because of these forces that this totally average guy, no special powers, no big talent, managed to stay locked on the hero's team. He didn't care at all if completing the mission earned him a reward. If power gets handed to you, refusing it is basically a sin. So Ed grabs the crystal ball. It starts blazing with light and boom, it bursts out something brand new. She handed him another jaw-dropping power, one first of its kind, with a single, deadly purpose, so precious it couldn't be squandered, not a second of it, until the very last moment, and then space itself rattled, then reality cracked, and wild distortions burst into view. A portal snapped into existence in front of him, but this one was different. Until now, every door had spawned nearby, marching in order, and this time, the first one appeared on the opposite side. Ed finally snaps into understanding. These doors aren't just special, they've been sitting here since before everything, even before the first journey ever began. Those doors led straight back to his real home, his native world. A storm of feelings crashes over him. Right here, if he swings open these doors, he'll finally claw his way back to where he was born, to the world he's been dreaming of for 100 years. Wait, what? 100 years? Everything else moved forward in normal time, so back in his hometown, 100 years have already slammed by. So what's waiting for him behind those doors? A full 100 years later, and it hits him. He didn't just wait, he handed a century to God. Or did someone rip that time right out of his life? He had zero clue why it was happening, no clue what it was for, or what it even meant. He just did the job he was shoved into, like his fate had already been decided. Quietly, he swallowed every thought, no questions, no answers. Didn't he deserve something good at the end, or did God demand he use the powers he got instead of praying to him? If this is an award, then it's a joke, because it isn't an award at all. God is gone quiet, so quiet it feels like the world is holding its breath. Then bam, he spotted her the book. Just like at the start, does God want him to run through it again? Right under the door titles, he spots the numbers. They counted how long had passed in every world since he left, and yeah, they're real, so why are they only showing up now? And exactly when did it all happen? One gate was stamped 000, which basically meant he could yank himself back to the exact second he was first abducted right on that day. He lunged for the handle, then the door refused to budge, and something crashed onto his head. Another book, this one came with a key hidden inside. They called it a memorable service of complete coercion, and Ed snapped out loud. He couldn't wrap his head around how anyone could think a gesture of memory was anything other than absurd, pointless, and completely unnecessary. The key had a wild power. It could crack open any of the past worlds, but only one time. He could dive into whatever world he wanted and come back to his own, yet the only way home was to spend that key again, inside that reality. After that, the key vanishes, then and only then the door stamped 000 swings open, and he finally gets his first real look at the world he's been chasing. To find out what happened to him, to finish his grueling journey at last, only he didn't need any of that. Right then, a new rule slammed into place. If he didn't come back with at least one of the worlds, the door to his home would stay shut forever. His jaws clenched, because if he has to march back through the path of exile just to get home, then the rage he's kept buried for over 100 years will finally detonate. But if all you're doing is using the key right in that space, it doesn't feel scary at all. Pick a world, step in, come back out, and it looks like an easy win at first glance. He grinned. Now tell me, where are you running to? Before all of it, maybe after one twist or another, he suddenly clocked something that felt strangely familiar. One of the gates had a sign that read 001, the first gate, the first world, and the one that hit the hardest. One day, everything hit him like a freight train. No warning, no explanation, just thrown into the world and landing in the hero's party. But his powers barely scraped by, nowhere near a city guard's level, because an ordinary guy never ends up there. Turns out the outcast's first skill was the real game changer, random flag bearer. That one move snapped him into the hero's orbit, and just like that, he earned a spot on the team. But that's when the real suffering kicked in. He couldn't keep up with everyone else, and his powers felt worthless, so he spent each day terrified of getting turned away, clawing desperately for any way to prove he mattered. He booked the stay, stocked up, packed his stuff, hunted down intel. He handled every tiny detail like a pro, yet he still has no clue what those three friends really thought of him. For the year and a half before the expulsion, they really felt like his closest crew, at least that's what it looked like. He got kicked out somewhere halfway down their shared road, but then everything hit harder. He snapped his gaze up at the sign over the gate, and there it was, 10 years. This has to be the move that smashes the Demon King for good. So tell me, doesn't that mean the world finally gets to breathe in peace? So if that's the case, don't rush, just take a stroll, soak in those familiar sights, and glide through a calm, easy journey. Even though this journey was forced on him, looking back, it wasn't all doom and gloom. Life slammed him with brutal hardships, but right in the middle of the chaos, the good moments hit just as hard. He steps through the gate and murmurs, "I'll miss this place." The world he was about to explode into on his very first legendary journey. His boots hit the familiar grass again. He shot upright and scanned the area. Wait, is this really where it all started? The scenery looked totally different, but for a split second it felt like his mind had wiped clean, everything gone. But nah, he never lost the important part. He'd tucked what mattered most deep inside, and the moment he came back, it all slammed right back into place. Out that way there should be a city, so he squinted, and yep, it's really there. If the Demon King's already been wiped out, then surely the brutal monsters nearby are gone too. But still, it's worth checking every last detail, because right then, an ambush hits like a lightning strike. A brutal blow slammed into him from behind. He stood his ground, digging his feet into the earth like he meant to win. A colossal serpent-like monster surged up over him. So why in the world was something this terrifying showing up in what was supposed to be a safe area? And right now, this is his golden chance. He flips on the traveler's treasure and raids his secret stash. He yanks his sword out and squares up for the fight. On his first trip here, he didn't realize Exile's skills still kick in the moment he's back in the world. Now, time to put that to the test. He lunges forward and smashes the snake right in the head, and when it snaps its mouth open to strike, Ed fires off another skill. Impenetrable wall. As everyone predicted, the snake's fangs can't break through. Every bite gets shoved back as a magical barrier force snaps into place. The monster exploded forward and Ed's eyes went wide. He clipped it just wrong and the attack slid past him. His defense held perfectly. He laughed and threw himself into the next assault. Right in front of the serpent's mouth, a glowing magical circle snapped into existence, spilling acid magic ready to burn, and yeah, this had to be the end. A geyser of compressed liquid barreled toward him, but it only splashed his skin for a second, nothing more. With the absorbing magical veil skill backing him up, even that wasn't scary because magic or brute physical strikes didn't faze him. The moment's here, the final showdown is officially upon us. He snapped back with a blazing strike, his hidden blade slammed into the target with deadly precision. Victory, now he didn't have to rush at all. He took control and set the pace for the whole journey. These are the spots, and this is exactly what he never got to see. Once he lived to battle beside the hero, but not anymore. Now he's finally free and he can go wherever his heart wants. And that traveler's treasure was packed to the brim with gold and silver hauled in from past worlds. Ed clocked it. One set of armor looked exactly like the hero's old one, so maybe it was the same outfit for selling sweet buns, complete with heroic steam baths and manju. He pictured it in his head. He didn't even need it, but he still wanted it. And then, out of nowhere, he spotted something and bolted. Wait, are you serious? Is this really a joke? What's going on? He's not stopping, not even for a second. The city was falling apart brick by brick, like the world was breaking in real time. Why would a demonic beast attack? Didn't they swear the Demon King was already dead? Or maybe it's not just a fight at all. It's a full-blown war between people brewing right now. After the demon's defeat, it'd feel wrong for everyone to start turning on each other, but only 10 years have passed. This doesn't even look like a proper reconstruction, so what the hell really went down here? An old man snapped him back, shocked that he was even there, and asked what he thought he was doing, because nothing's been left here for ages. So tell me, did he stumble in on some fake rumor? The old man shoves a bag into his hands and barks, "Be careful." Ed just stares, totally thrown. He didn't come here to hunt the ruins. But tell me, was that place really the one that got wiped out? The old man shoots back in shock. This place has been wrecked for 2 whole years. The Demon King's army wiped the entire city off the map. 2 years ago, the army of the Demon King was unleashed. Ed couldn't even process it. What was he saying? Does the army still exist? The old man just kept staring and then spit out, "Yeah, it's been roaming the world for ages. But tell me, where are you from exactly?" Ed blurts, "Aren't these just leftovers? Are they still working?" And the hero, the old man frowns. "Hero," Ed snaps back, "Yeah, Alexis. 10 years back, the prince of this kingdom came within a breath of crushing the Demon King, and yeah, Alexis, that's who I'm talking about." The old man shoots back, "Alexis died 5 years ago, slaughtered in a war against the demon army." Ed can't believe it. Dead, the hero. He lets out a shaky laugh like it's a joke, because this is the hero, right? No way, and then it clicks, so that's why that monster was lurking near the city. No matter what he believes, that ruined city screams the truth, there's no denying it. Ed even admits, if the hero had been here, maybe all of this wouldn't have gone so wrong. Ed yanked the old man by the shoulders and snapped, "Where are the others?" Because 2 more were supposed to be in the hero's squad. The old man only shrugged like it didn't even matter. Maybe they were gone for good, too. The one thing he couldn't shake was this: he'd heard 0 rumors that they'd survived. It was a complete nightmare. Once they were everyone's hope, now it's all splintered into ruins. Ed had heard things were going great, but now he couldn't shake the doubt. People only believed what they were fed, and that's why it all fell apart. No matter who Ed really is, prince or hero, death slams the door on everything. The old man throws him a look of hope, wishes him luck, and tells him to follow his own path. The dead, the thought hit him like a hammer, sharp and gut-wrenching. Did they really die, like for real? Real heroes, none of that fraud nonsense, still got crushed by the demon army, so why did it happen? And after his exile, what in the world came next? Did everyone just meet their end? Alexis Gonzo Tia, so it's all his fault. Did everything crumble just because he vanished, because he wasn't there? No way. Thinking everything could have flipped just because of some ordinary carrier is pure nonsense, and it's way too arrogant to assume that. He remembered every one of the fallen, his brothers in arms he'd fought alongside. He had to witness the end of that world with his own eyes, so he activates the exile skill. Compass of the past, team bolts to uncover where hero Alexis met his end. The compass flared to life. Alexis was truly gone, and that needle slammed straight toward the demon Demon King's castle. Next up is Gonzo. He hunts the same spot again and again, only to find the same ending: they died together. So what is he supposed to do next? Where does he even go from here? Maybe you can track where she died and raise proper graves, but first Tia. He says her full name out loud, Tia Lunarisha ****, and right then, the hunt for the place of her death kicks off. The compass twitched like it heard something, then it locked up cold, utterly confused. The screen sat empty, then he rewrote the request in a snap. This time, we're zeroing in on where Tia Lunarishi is right now. The compass is spinning again, then the needle snaps to the direction it wants him to follow. Ed doesn't hesitate, he slams another exile skill into action right away. The leap of Hermes, his body launched forward like a lightning-fast arrow. Tia was all he could think about. The speed kept climbing, he never once slowed down. She's alive, and that's the only thing that mattered. A lake stretches out ahead of him, and he barrels forward like nothing can stop him. Right at the water's edge, he calls forth yet another power of the outcast. He swore he heard her voice, Ed, and the echo hit like lightning in his head as he shot past flocks of geese. Mirage shift is on, time snaps and starts running backward. He rockets along those razor-thin mountain trails, sprinting like the climb itself is hunting him. He leaps over the blazing fast streams, and when the clock hits 1728, monsters close in and start tearing into him. He plows straight through them without slowing down as the timer hits 0. Maybe the skill's power just faded, but he doesn't stop running. Voices thundered near the castle walls, demons snapped to orders, and this march was meant to wipe out yet another human city, because their victory was damn near in reach. The order hit like thunder: charge forward and smash every single thing in your way. The monsters roared together, shaking the sky like a brutal warning that disaster was coming. But then bam, one of them spotted something lurking right behind them. It was Ed. The monsters froze in total confusion. Then the command snapped back and they surged forward, blasting into the air like a thunderclap. Ed tore through them and the monsters spun in total confusion. Wait, what is going on? He slammed the skill to life, then the monsters lifted off the ground and hung there, totally defenseless, and panic ripped through them instantly. Ed tightened his jaw, horrified. His lightning sprint carved out such a perfect circle that you could spot it from space. At last, he skidded to a stop at the forest's edge, panting like crazy, and forced himself to slow his breathing. Still not fully steady, he shot a look at the compass. Was this really the spot? Doubt clawed its way into his chest, and suddenly he wasn't sure of anything. Then it hit him, he completely forgot to grab the gift. I needed something warm and full of soul, then it hit me: sweet, fragrant orange fruits. He remembered it all. Tia adored sweets, so he grabbed a basket and got to work. And I found myself standing right in front of her door, heart hammering. He knocked, then panic hit, because to her, he's just an outcast, nothing more. What's the point of waiting for a smile, and would he even be welcome in this house at all? His jaws clenched, he'd come too far to fold now, so he slammed the door again, even harder. Silence hit, no reply at all. Doubts hit him again. What if she's not home? The silence feels way too heavy. He knocks once more, then again, and it still doesn't add up. Something's seriously off. The door hung open just a crack. He was about to slip in without permission when, out of nowhere, someone called his name. He went rigid, then a voice snapped his name, and the shock hit him like a punch. The girl couldn't wrap her head around it, like the whole thing had to be a dream that hadn't let her wake up yet. Ed's eyes shot wide open. Wait, it was Tia. Her golden yellow hair flared in the sunlight, her jade eyes gleaming just like a century ago, and before he could even get a word out, time ran out. Tia came barreling toward him with a blood-curdling scream, slamming into him like a joyful bomb, and for a split second it felt like the world froze, because she was right there, exactly the same as before. Her emotions spilled out as she wrapped him in a crushing hug, so intense it felt like she'd snapped the world in half. He stood there, completely stunned. Everything hit him all at once, way too sudden to breathe. He tried to steady himself, but her wild energy kept hammering at his nerves, and she refused to believe it was really him. Right after they broke up, she hunted for him like a ghost, questioning people, pacing the streets, scanning every corner, but there wasn't a single trace, not even a whisper, and nobody had heard a thing about where he'd gone. He didn't want to bother her, but after the expulsion, everything turned into a stain, so he ditched his name, vanished to another country, and started over. Then, just 10 minutes after getting kicked out, he slipped right back into the white world. She couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears of joy poured down her cheeks like a flood, and that relief hit her so hard it nearly broke her. Even he was barely standing, emotions crashing over them both. She admitted she'd nearly fallen, and he dropped into a crouch right beside her. Orange fruits sat there in a pile. "Why are there so many?" Tia asked. Then it clicked: this was his souvenir, a little gift from him. She felt moved, but here's the catch: her house has 0 bathtub. And those fruits are usually eaten right there, sliced, washed, and soaked in that soothing scent that leaves your skin feeling soft. Still, Ed didn't bring them for tradition. He brought them just to taste, sweet, delicious, and packed with care. He pushed her to take a bite right there, smiling like he knew a secret. Trust me, the flavor's gonna blow you away. He even pointed out exactly where to slice, and it totally pays off. She stared at him again, and her whole gaze shifted. Her gaze snagged on his torn clothes. Why was he so wrecked? Ed burst into laughter. He'd literally crossed the world just to run into an old acquaintance again. She flashed a smile, but inside, she couldn't help wondering, why was he pushing this so damn hard? She said it all cool, I'm just going to change, and told him, don't rush, take your time. And that's when Ed finally clocked it. She was still stuck in her pajamas, and that changing together joke just cooked him with embarrassment because he absolutely hadn't planned on changing at all. He'd never been the kind of guy women flocked to, and Tia always stayed way too close, pressed in so tight he could feel her breath on him, making his whole body start to shake. He whipped his head around, and yeah, this was Tia's place. His eyes tore through the room, past the table, and every warm little detail that made the whole place feel cozy. He rushed up to the door, shoved the curtain aside, and slipped inside. Tia yelled from the other room, snapping an apology for the delay, and Ed answered, then went stone still. So, how do I look? She asked, and even though her face was different, the outfit was exactly the same as before. He just gaped. Why was she wearing asterisk that at home? Was it pure caution, or was it something she always did? Because what else are you supposed to do when someone vanishes for a whole year and then walks back in out of nowhere? And right then, her voice cut through the air and called him back. He shot back instantly, but she stayed cool and simply said, take it off. And right there, he froze, totally baffled. What was she even talking about? Later, while Tia stitched his clothes back together, she shot a sideways glance at the fruit, brows narrowed like she expected the same sour disappointment again. But Ed leaned in with full confidence and swore it was sweet, and just like that, Tia chose to trust him. While she kept sewing with steady hands, she looked up and blurted, help me. It came so fast and simple that Ed just froze, totally confused. He hesitated, sadness crashing in his chest, then, bit by bit, he gave in and agreed. He grabbed a piece of fruit and held it right up to her lips. She pulled a playful grimace and snapped, sour, you lied. For a split second, Ed hesitated, then he tasted it himself, and boom, the fruit was sweet. He hit the button again and insisted, make sure. The flavor was so unmistakable to him. Then he even asked, is this a prank? She burst out laughing. It's a little childish, yeah, but it's cute. Because honestly, they always messed around like this, right? But for Ed, it wasn't some harmless joke. This felt one-sided, like she was only teasing him. And Tia, she looked genuinely stunned. Did he really miss that she was showing him affection, and how much of it? She might have looked young, but she was an elf over 100 years old. To her, Ed probably felt like a kid, so he kept his distance, holding back from being intrusive. He honestly thought the caution made sense, and then she just smiled and said, even after 100 years, I haven't changed. Ed snapped back, bitter as poison, you're the one who kicked me out of the hero squad. The air turned ice cold, then Tia's face hardened. Her silence sliced through everything. Ed blurted, I'm not mad, I just remembered that was reckless. I never meant to put blame on you. Tia apologized. Ed insisted it was his fault, even bowed his head, begged for forgiveness, and when he finally heard her reply, it hit like a twist. So you came to blame me, didn't you? You came back because you think I'm the only one left alive. Her words hit like a punch to the chest, so Ed pressed her to tell him what really went down. Tia never looked up. She kept sewing, steady as ever, then spoke softly. After Ed was gone, they scrambled to find someone to replace him. But it all fell apart. One minute they were stuck on the front lines, fighting in the war against the demon army, and the next, the only people who stepped up were glory chasers, not real comrades. But they didn't need another warrior, they needed a lifeline in the back, carrying supplies so the front line could crush the fight. The newcomers missed it completely. They chased glory, not logistics. They cycled through 6 different people and none lasted, because nobody could truly click with the team, so they finally hired a seasoned porter. Still, he vanished after just 3 months, so Ed was thrown for a loop. If it wasn't plain incompetence, then what the hell made him go? Tia said that carrier only hauled luggage, period. But Ed went way beyond that. He scrubbed, ironed, organized the whole place, and even cooked the meals. Ed still remembered that era like it happened yesterday, weak, terrified of getting kicked out and forcing himself to do every tiny job just to be useful. Even his despair got brushed off as normal, and Alexis fully believed every successor should suffer and strive the same way. The host straight up said, I'm not here to scrub floors or cook. If you need that, hire a servant. and that sentence laid out exactly what he'd be doing. Alexis blew up, then booted him out on the spot, and Ed instantly nodded. If they were held to that standard, disappointment would be guaranteed because nobody could copy what he pulled off. Even Tier admitted that back then, they just didn't have the time to clock everything. Only after that whole disaster did they finally understand what that expelled person truly meant and what they'd thrown away. Tia clenched her teeth because after that disaster, the party's name went straight down the drain and suddenly nobody wanted to team up with them anymore. Then, right when things hit rock bottom, someone finally showed up. A promise slinger who'd haul any baggage and do any job with zero grumbling. Alexis took him in on the spot, just like Tia did with Gonzo. With a brand new participant finally on the team, they kicked the expedition back into motion at last, and he pushed himself harder than ever. After that brutal, soul-draining trek, they plunged deep into the demonic world. And as they tore through the pitch-black primeval forest, they finally stumbled upon the Demon King's realm. Tia felt something was seriously wrong, so she started making critical preparations way before it all went down. But at the worst possible second, right when the final battle was moments away, the new bearer sold them out. He vanished straight out of the room, and with him went every potion and magical artifact. In a blink, his body melted into a burst of blue light, and everyone instantly knew it wasn't magic at random, it was a teleportation crystal. Tia didn't just say it, she confirmed she'd prepped those crystals for the emergency evacuation in case everything totally failed, so everyone could still make it back to the capital. They couldn't risk leaving those crystals in battle, one wrong move and they'd trigger by accident. So she shoved every party crystal into the newcomer's hands, then just went quiet. Ed froze on the spot. Was he really that terrified and just ran? And how could someone who'd survived the whole demonic world with them turn on them that easily? Or maybe that was asterisk the whole plan, slip into the broken crew, earn their trust, and then vanish right when the timing hits perfect. Edda's rage flared like fire in her chest, but Tia let out a tired sigh. She just couldn't tell what the man was really up to. After the betrayal, they had one brutal option: throw themselves into the fight with zero backup. During the fight, she shrieked Alexis's name at the top of her lungs. Then he started coughing up blood. If things turned to total disaster, there was a teleportation crystal buried in the heart of his armor, the final shot at survival. He had to live, no matter what. No matter what hit the world, it demanded a hero, and he was the last spark of hope. She grabbed him and begged, please use the crystal. Alexis was the gods' chosen prince of a great state, yet when it was time to be saved, he only offered an apology. She snapped back, you're our leader, our choice. But Alexis couldn't stomach salvation if it meant sacrificing his comrades, because that broke every belief he'd ever stood on. And finally, he made the call, and the crystal snapped into 1,000 screaming shards. Tia shot her hand out, but it was already too late, and she couldn't even graze him. Tears poured like a river, and at the finish line, he threw pride in first, choosing it over duty. Not salvation, though, ideals. And yeah, that doesn't shock me. Alexis has always been built like this, ready to pick the wrong move if it matches his principles. But he wasn't the only one, oh no. He refused to throw his comrades under the bus just to live as a lone survivor. Tia's tears surged even harder, spilling out like her heart couldn't hold it back anymore. Ed met her eyes and asked, are you finally calm? Tia barely nodded, murmuring an apology and a thank you under her breath. Ed slowly dropped his gaze, and Tia jumped in to tell him what happened next. Then, right after it all went down, they dragged her into a secret room hidden inside the royal castle of Notland. She stepped in and the room went suspicious fast. Everyone grilled her. What happened to Prince Alexis? Why did she come back alone? Did she really steal the teleportation crystal? And then, right from the shadows, one name slammed into the air, Lunarisha. The king himself stormed out and questioned her face to face, what was going on with his son, and she spilled the whole truth, no secrets left. The king heard her out, then snapped, vanish, hide so deep no one can find you. After that, they officially declared the hero's squad dead in the demon world. Ed froze in disbelief, but it didn't take long to realize this was the only logical move. Alexis picked the life of companions and threw the mission aside, and Ed knew that was exactly the choice he'd make too. But from the hero's eyes, that move looked like a fatal mistake, like he was already headed for condemnation. No matter how noble Alexis meant it, all she managed was keeping Tia alive. Then boom, the whole squad got replaced. Ed realized the king granted his son's final wish, and Tia snapped, that's exactly why I'm banned from the next 3 trips to the demon world. Ed's eyes popped wide. Trips. Tia blurted, stunned, so you don't know anything at all? Where had Ed been hiding for all this time, living under a rock or what? Ed just chuckled and a small smile tugged at Tia's lips. The Alliance of Nations threw together 3 rescue missions to rip Alexis out of there. Sure, everyone knew their army wouldn't cut it, but they tried anyway. What they really had no answer for was hope. So they shoved forward on pure military force, and every single attempt crashed and burned. She told Ed point blank that her being in this city was a state secret. Then she stared him down. "How did you find me?" Ed admitted he'd just gotten a magical artifact that lets him hunt people, and once he realized she'd been found, curiosity went nuclear as he started digging into what happened to everyone. But when he hunted for Alexis and Gonzo, all he found was silence. No clues, no answers, and Tia just quietly accepted it, like the truth finally hit her at finally. She apologized again, then brushed it off with a shaky smile. "It's fine, I managed to accept it. Nobody could survive an army like that." Ed stared back, and that heavy sadness hit him straight in the eyes. Suddenly, Tia snapped and said she was finished. She yanked up the cloak she'd been stitching, and embroidered flowers bloomed across the fabric like magic. "So, what do you think?" she asked. "Sweetheart," Ed said, grinning. Then the world yanked underneath them as the ground started to shake, and the smile vanished. He shuddered hard, and the air around him thrummed with a wild, unsettling vibration. He stared out the window, and something felt terribly wrong. Then he finally saw it, and his eyes locked in place. Right ahead of him, a younger dragon waits, right here in his face. So tell me, did he really get completely lost the moment he ditched the mountains? "This never happened at all." Tia bolted after him and demanded, "Why did you leave?" Ed tried to throw up excuses, but she slammed the moment shut. "Go back to the house." She shot back, "I've got this," but the dragon snarled, bared its fangs, and blasted fire straight at her. Ed brags that he could take an enemy like that without breaking a sweat, but before he could do a thing, a brutal hit slammed him backward. He hit the ground with a heavy thud. The dragon's fire thundered through the air, swallowing the exact spot where Tia had just been standing. But then she shot back, and a massive wall of water surged up, blasting right between them and smothering the flames. Ed stared in total shock. Water was pouring like a living wall. Tia wouldn't let a single soul die anymore, and this time, she was going to stand between him and danger. She snapped into a chant and summoned the asterisk silver moon blade, asterisk twisting the air into sharp spirals. Then she called on the asterisk green moon blade. Asterisk feathers from asterisk 6 spirits asterisk pouring in from asterisk 3 directions asterisk fused together, building a shield that mirrored even the dimmest light. She declared her name was Lunar Risha, and then blasted, "I am the manifestation of the triune dream." A surge of raw power slammed into the dragon, and with one crushing hit, it collapsed to the ground. Tia slowly lowered her hand, and Ed was left speechless. One hit, boom, everything was gone. That spell was so brutal it tore through the scales and cut the bones from the inside out. Ed just stared in shock because ever since they split, she'd gotten asterisk way stronger. Tia shot back at him and demanded he leave, her whole body shaking, breaths coming in hard bursts, each inhale ragged and broken. Ed edged closer, hands shaking, and demanded to know what happened. Then Tia looked up and told him to believe her, and he went totally still as her trembling hand waved and she forced a broken smile through ragged breaths. She admitted she got swept up in the fight like it had been forever since her last one, and she just wanted to leave an impression, the kind that screams, "I'm fine." But the truth hit hard, shaky movements, shallow breaths. And when anyone questioned it, she brushed it off with a laugh, claiming she just lost her form. She swapped into something that would make Edu notice, then teased him to his face, like, "Seriously, why are you always this tense?" With a playful smile, she slipped into her room and vanished. With one grimace to his face, she climbed the ladder like it was the last step in a war zone, while Ed froze there, brimming with anxious thoughts. She's a former member of the hero squad, and she'll be fine, right? Her condition looked grim, but Tia had always been tough. Still, that scream in his mind wouldn't shut up. "Get out of here." What did it mean? Ed shoved the thought aside for now. First, he had to handle the dragon's corpse himself. He was determined to stash it in the traveler's treasure, where nothing goes bad, but he still sliced up the meat just to be safe. The second he started prepping, a heavy, dull thud rolled through the house like thunder. Ed went ice cold, slammed to a stop, and blurted her name because something was horribly wrong. Ed got swallowed by a nasty misunderstanding with zero answers, so he burst inside and sprinted straight for the ladder that shot up. He started to speak as he stood up, then froze because she was lying on the floor. He went rigid with terror. She managed a faint call for him. He bolted over, grabbed her, and the moment his fingers met hers, he knew something was horribly, catastrophically wrong. Her skin started to twist and shift, scales erupted across her body, crawling outward inch by inch like a terrifying curse. Black bruises crawled across his chest, then looped around his neck, arms, torso, and legs, like something was rotting him from the inside out. She murmured about the clothes, and when Ed heard it, shock hit him hard. Then he quickly handed her exactly what she asked for. Golden sunlight blazed through the window and spilled across the room, and collapsed onto her exhausted body. She dragged herself upright and slowly got dressed like the last of the storm had finally passed. Ed watched her breathe, every shaky inhale, every small sign she was okay, and then she murmured that she felt a little better. She didn't want to keep secrets anymore, but now he absolutely had to know. In her fights against Alexis, she had to unleash forbidden elven techniques. It was a secret technique that supercharged the magic of spirits, but the cost was brutal. You had to fuse your magic directly into your own life force. She flinched, life like fuel. She nodded, and the truth hit hard. She was literally burning her own life. His mind was in a full spin. She'd looked perfectly fine just moments ago, so where did this brutal collapse come from? And then it hit him. That spell, she unleashed its full power and smashed the dragon to pieces, using the last scrap of her life to make it happen. She smirked and said, "If you didn't do it, you'd be dead." No hesitation, just that one terrifying thought steering her forward. She was so sure he'd break until reality hit. She had no idea how insanely strong Ed had gotten while she was gone. She admitted her magic was completely drained for ages. She was only still standing because of the clothes she was wearing. That sacred garment was soaked in the power of the sacred tree, wear it, and the magic kept her alive. But the moment she yanked it off and unleashed the final spell, it was over. Everything fell silent. The magic spiraled out of control, crushing her body, and that's when the younger dragon finally sensed her, because the tree's protection vanished. Inside Ed's head, the whole world flipped upside down, because every single disaster that followed happened thanks to him. He showed up to make sure she was safe, armed with nothing but his own faith. But then, how did it all end? He blamed himself for everything, and Tia caught that look instantly. She walked right up to him and said softly, "Don't look like that." She knew her time was ticking fast, for an elf at least, but not once did she regret a single breath. She lived it fully, every moment. She lived the real thing, friendship, purpose, Alexis and her crew right beside her, and then at the very end she finally saw Ed again. For her, that reunion was all she needed. In her last chapter there was zero regret, just pure gratitude. But Ed, shaking with fear, cut her off, begging her not to say goodbye because they'd just found each other again. But when he peered through the window, he saw the enemy already closing in fast. They showed up way sooner than anyone expected, and Tia spun toward him, begging to run, while Ed stayed rock solid and refused. She tried again, right into the same dead end because it didn't work. He even admitted it. On the outside, he looked just like he did 10 years ago. Maybe he sometimes even swallowed that lie himself. But his body stayed youthful, just like the day they tossed him out. But deep down, something inside him had changed. Once he tore himself away from her, he didn't slow down. He trained through pain, survived every hit, and kept leveling up. 100 years later, he had crossed 100 worlds, hoarding knowledge, strength, and skills, and now, he's not the one they cast out. He crossed paths with countless people, and every single one turned into a goodbye. Then he kept moving, because what he witnessed and what he gained dwarfed anything she could ever dream of. He trained until power surged through him, strong enough to battle, defend the people he loved, and rewrite his fate. And now he's finally here for her. He'll shield her no matter what it costs. Then a thunderous rumble hits the street. The monsters are already closing in. Ed's face snapped, warmth vanished in an instant, and his eyes turned ice cold, burning with pure determination. Tia threw herself at him, begging him to run again, but he didn't budge for a second. He refused to leave her. Not ever again. This time, his choice was already locked in. Even then, she still threw herself between danger and him, and it crushed him to the core, so what else could he possibly do? No wind can claw the dead back from the dark, no victory can steal time from the grave, and it sure as hell won't mend the body she lost. He finally got it. But even so, he refuses to let it all end right here. If there's even a tiny miracle left, one shot to crawl back into the days they once shared, he's taking it, no questions asked. He thrusts his hand up and calls forth the fury of his bloody weapon. That ancient blacksmith skill finally kicked in one brutal swing, and the deadly power circle sliced through an entire army of monsters. Magic tore through the air like a hurricane, and monsters dropped by the dozen while Tia stood there, nailed to the spot in stunned silence. Ed was surrounded by the dead, and then he froze. A memory hit him hard, that power. He'd almost wiped it from his mind. a skill he'd never unlocked, one last one-time shot. And deep down, he knew this was exactly why it was left waiting. If this was the power of some rejected outcast, so maybe she'll finally give in and let him return, and then they can start everything over from scratch. In her memories, Tia relived the day of the expulsion, bitterness burning in her chest, because she'd never imagined Ed would go that far. But she couldn't keep traveling with him anymore. Alexis cracked a joke, too much trouble just to cut loose one burden. Then Tia shot back, if we do it that way, he won't let go, and once that happens, I won't be able to protect him anymore. She was sure he'd despise her, but no matter what, she still wanted Ed to survive. So the world could finally rest in peace. Then Ed locked in and shouted, this is it, the end. He swung toward her and demanded, tell me I kept you safe, did I? Tia barely managed a smile and asked, so you really got that strong? Ed admitted that after getting expelled, he threw himself back into training, and Tia just nodded like she'd seen it coming. She softly breathed his name, then looked up and asked, could he take her all the way to the border of the demonic world? Can she? Even if she can't, she still gets it. Ed blurted, stunned, asking what she meant. Then he gently stroked her head and said, you can count on me, no matter what chaos hits, I'll carry you through. Her eyes lit up, brimming with tears. She let out a soft laugh, and Ed kept his mouth shut, because he didn't want to know what was waiting for her out there at the edge. He already knew. Then he stared at her and blurted, does it hurt? He knew the road ahead would be brutal, so he told her to hang on tight, and Tia nodded like she understood. If anything felt off, she promised she'd speak up, but in his head, only one thought remained. They swore they'd grant her final wish, and then they took off. The whole night roared so loud it drowned out every thought. Fields lay littered with dead monsters, and between those jagged rocky towers, even the silence felt suffocating. Astrorefus is right here, Tia just confirmed it, and she insisted they set her down on the ground. This is the very spot where Alexis once unleashed a transfer crystal and vanished from the world. She never once believed she'd ever step back into this place. She shot Edu a grateful smile, then I couldn't help but wonder, are Alexis and Gonzo watching them right this second? Ed turned out way stronger than she'd ever dared to hope. One night, and he tore through demonic lands that used to feel nearly impossible for them, and maybe he was already stronger than Alexis himself. She could barely manage a smile. The boy she swore she'd protect turned around and became her shield. But what if she never stepped in that day? After the Demon Lord's fall, the world didn't end. It kept moving forward. Ed tried to blurt out what she felt, but all that slipped out was a trembling whisper of his name. She thanked him again and again, determined to make his wish come true too. Then Ed stepped in, grinning as he reassured her that his dream was already right within reach. She blurted, what kind of dream is this supposed to be? He shot back, I haven't been home in forever. Tia immediately chimed in, buzzing to see his place too. A grin split his face, you're always welcome, Mom's gonna be over the moon. She burst out laughing. Seriously? He nodded hard. Absolutely, I might even bring a souvenir, a bow for Dad, and a gorgeous dress for Mom. But if he comes back loaded with wealth, some fools will try to rob him, then he'll bring them straight to Tia. She smiled, and everything came rushing back. With exile fueling his fire, he could do anything, slay a demon, rise as a hero, then claim the title of Lord of the Kingdom, but her eyes were already slipping shut. Her hand dropped and the flower in her grip shot up into the sky, snatched away by the wind like it had a mind of its own. Ed seethed as he stared into the dark. Was this whole mess just some divine plan playing out? A full century and all he'd ever been was a pawn. Maybe it was always supposed to go that way. Maybe that's exactly why they handed him those totally insane skills. And if that's true, he'll keep dancing with his final breath on the line. He demanded just one thing, take my past, my future, everything I've got left, and grant my one wish. Then he slammed his last exile skill, *infinite one-time right. A pillar of light blasted into the sky, ripping straight through the clouds and space, so bright it stole your breath. Then, out of nowhere, everything went dead silent, like the universe vanished. He snapped his eyes open. Around him sat a table and a chair, surrounded by stark white emptiness. No dream, no escape, just real silence. He called out to someone, but nope, this wasn't a dream. His gut screamed reality, yet he still couldn't figure out where he was. Did he get kidnapped? Did he die? No, he's still alive. He forced his heartbeat to slow, then reminded himself of the last job of the day, wiping out those mole-like creatures that were ravaging the fields. After lunch, he stormed into the forest to wipe out the nest. Then, at the very end of the tunnel, he finally spotted the door. Ed's whole body jolted as he stared at what was right in front of him. A plain white book, nothing fancy at all. So what kind of miracle is that asterisk supposed to be? Then it all clicked hard. He got kicked out of his home world, and to go back he had to latch onto a heroic party across 100 wild worlds, only to be expelled from every single one. Expelled, expelled, expelled until the final door opened. What kind of insanity is that? He snorted, yeah, that's not happening. Then it hit, what kind of hero did he think he was? Just an ordinary mercenary, and even dreaming about joining the heroes felt ridiculous until something suddenly blazed to life. A glittering crystal bullet inside, a taunting message, touch it and power will flood your veins. Suspicious as hell, blinding, almost unreal, but deep in his chest he begged for home. Then he snapped, cursing everything that brought him here because he knew one truth. He couldn't stay stuck, he had to push forward, and he hauled in every ounce of courage he had. I shot my hand out, my fingers met his then. A voice doesn't come through your ears, it slams inside your skull. Flagmaker. It's a skill that'll forge a hero, and it comes with something extra too, presence. A lone figure somewhere out there went rigid as his eyes blew wide open, like lightning just cracked him in the forehead. His mind exploded, then a torrent of che-u-je-iye memories crashed in like a wave, flooding every thought. But this isn't his memory at all. Life from some other world, faces, footsteps everywhere. Then it hits, exile. 10, 20, 40, 80, each one slams him with a fresh wave of agony until his head feels like it'll split. Enough. But he refused to quit because even inside the wreckage, he could rewrite the past. Memory and strength, pain and panic, all smashing together and daring to rip him open from the inside. Then right in the middle of that storm, one face broke through, Tia. He's finally answering, and that's when the real craving hits. His fist whips down onto the table, slam, he did it. He outplayed even God himself, played the game, then walked away the winner. And for just one-time demand, he unlocked power beyond reason, the kind that belongs to the 101st world. That outcast power was so wild and ruthless that even the gods couldn't spot it. Another batch, here comes the blessing from the second round. Every skill and every memory from his future self gets yanked into him right here, right now, inside this blinding white space. But it'll never happen again, miracles don't hit twice. He grinned and said, and honestly, once is more than enough. He yanked his shoulder into place, steadied his breath, then the fear vanished. He's ready, and now he's invincible. He endured exile in every single world, and he already knew the cruel truth waiting at the finish, a pathetic end. But this time, everything changes. He'll forge a world where everyone cheers, throws their heads back laughing, and stays alive, and his second start, it's already begun. And boom, he's back in the original world again. The man snaps and demands to join, and the hero, ice calm, steps in and tells him to drop his voice. He regrets it, but at this point he insists he doesn't need that kind of power. Then he drops a hint that he might end up carrying the equipment himself. His stare is icy and the crowd closes in fast. Everyone's chanting the hero's name like he's a legend. Then one person snaps, wait, this is the third time he's refused. While someone else can't help but think, should I even go for it too? A woman sneers, who's even going to take any of us? Then another voice cuts in, what if the hero hands me the lives of my comrades? And the whole crowd erupts into laughter. And right there in the crowd, eyes blazing with pure determination, one hero locks onto it, then spins around fast. Is he staring at us? No, it's not about us. No way, he's locked in on me. Then Ed shows up, voice sharp, step steady. I'm the strongest porter and the strongest swordsman. So hero, are you interested in hiring a guy like me? The hero stared at him, stunned, couldn't place his face at all. When the heck did he sneak in here? The crowd hushed, who is this guy? Even the hero tightened up because this was already the fourth fighter of the day, and yeah, he looked like a total outsider. Ed decided it was time to stir up some intrigue. He introduced himself as a traveler with no destination, just an ordinary adventurer. In his memories, their first meeting came crashing back when he chased the hero, begged to join the party, and even offered to work for free. They took him in as a porter, and that was the mistake because people like him never decide anything for real. Now he finally understood, if you want greatness, you have to chase something higher. The hero shot a skeptical look. How am I supposed to fight if I'm dragging all this gear? Ed was already gearing up to answer. He threw down a challenge. He'd beat the hero even while carrying that burden, and maybe that'll finally sway him. He knew the danger too. Last time it all detonated in his face. Still, this time he's not just coming, he's bringing steel as a swordsman. And it's not just hype, Alexis even admitted how terrifying his power really is. The air screamed, then the fork shot up like a missile, and in the blink of an eye, boom, an explosion swallowed the moment. Alexis didn't back down, she told Ed, if you can survive the fights with the load, then we'll finally talk. Ed swallowed his pride and agreed. He'd go along with whatever Alexis decided. The tavern owner was sweating bullets, one more hit and the whole place would come crashing down, so Ed shot a signal. let the hero strike first. But before Alexis could even finish his sentence, he exploded forward, lunging like a bullet, and Ed barely squeezed in a parry to stop the hit. That fork slammed into the sword with a brutal clang, and somehow Ed stayed stone calm even though it happened out of nowhere. Alexis looked annoyed, but he couldn't deny the guy actually had real skills. The hero tossed out a sarcastic jab about the cold steak, and Ed shot back with a joke, only for him to snub it with pure disdain and wave it off. Alexis lived by this rule: whoever stands in front of him, a true hero, doesn't dodge, he charges straight into the challenge. Because in the end, a real hero proves their strength, making that the reason everyone trusts them. Hope for beating the Demon Lord lived in one thing: believing in his power with full confidence, and only the brave enough to show their strength in front of everyone were allowed to join the hero's party. If he doubts Ed's strength, he'll never earn recognition, so Alexis snapped his fingers. Then the fight shifted into a whole new stage. Ed clocked it the moment the steak started cooling, because that meant he wasn't just a loader anymore. He was dead set on proving he could fight. The hero ramped up the pressure, and then he confessed, "Ed, he's not that simple." And once more he surged forward, throwing himself straight at the enemy. The blade whistled sideways, and Ed snapped out of the way just in time. Alexis didn't slow down. She kept hitting the button over and over, while Ed, still gripping that plate of steak, fought back without even letting it go. But every single punch got met at the last second, block after block, sharper and bolder with each hit. Ed smirked to himself. No way the hero saw this coming. But yeah, this still wasn't even his real full power. Alexis snapped the prediction into place. He shifted his stance, yanked the sword back, and started setting up for the real strike. Ed held his breath. This was the hero's move, and right then his sword started to fracture. That bargain iron blade snapped under the strain. Its days were running out fast. Right in the chaos of battle, the steak ripped off the plate and splattered onto the ground. A sudden sacrifice hit like a punch. Ed instantly got it. This hero wasn't playing anymore, he meant business. Alexis snapped a warning: if he didn't shut, then he'll unleash the real deal, what a true hero's strike looks like. The moon sword. Ed immediately tested his choices, hit the impenetrable fortress, and shut the attack out. But that still wouldn't satisfy him unless the world finally noticed. If he wanted to stand shoulder to shoulder with the heroes, he had to face the blade's strike, one he'd sharpened for a full 100 years. Alexis locked eyes with him and flashed a sign. Then Ed tightened his focus, measured the exact angle, and launched a sharp counter-strike, matching the hero's move like a perfect mirror. He's about to flip the force vector. It looked like Ed had dropped straight out of the sky, and Alexis just watched in silence as he slammed down hard on his feet. Even with the blade shattered, Ed refused to give up. Then he let out a breath of relief, because those broken pieces still turned into a weapon. The crowd went wild, because for the very first time, someone finally dared to stand toe-to-toe with the hero. In the middle of the crowd, voices bounced off the walls. Then one girl, clearly spacing out, blurted that Ed was really handsome. Her friend laughed and said he had to be her type. And just like that, someone threw in, "Hey, his name's Ed." One man stared in disbelief. Could someone like that really be a commoner? Right then, he spotted Ed digging through the wreckage, but before his mind could go further, Ed and Alexis started talking, and the conversation ripped his focus away. Ed snapped at the hero. If that strike had landed on anyone else, they'd be dead, no question. Alexis snapped back. This guy never makes a move without a plan. But just as the argument started to heat up, thunderous laughter ripped through the room. The giant bragged that if getting smashed by a hero counted as part of the selection, there's no way he'd ever make it through. Ed was about to fire back at the old man, then froze because he knew the face. It was Gonzo, the monk. Gonzo broke it down. Before Alexis went all out, he flashed him a signal to step in if trouble hit, because this was a calculated gamble, not a blind leap. That's why he grinned and leaned in, asking if Ed remembered who he was, because of course Ed did, the legendary fighter healer, with hands no one else could ever match. Gonzo leaned in and flexed like he owned the place, while Alexis declared he's the team's main healer. But right in the middle of it, a woman stormed up with pure displeasure. She was convinced they were already late to leave, so she whipped around and demanded an explanation from Alexis. He answered in a calm voice, then Ed instantly froze the second her voice hit his ears. Alexis snapped that he was only flexing his grandeur to put that arrogant commoner in his place. The woman looked stunned because this wasn't some casual meet and greet, it was a serious reception. She spun to Gonz, "Why didn't you stop it?" And he just shrugged it off, insisting it really wasn't that bad. For Ed, it hit way too hard, like way too hard. He was supposed to be having their first real conversation, but the second he heard that familiar sound, his heart clenched tight. She closed the distance to him, nerves buzzing. "Are you hurt?" But he didn't answer. His silence said it all. Then she heard it in his eyes and saw it in his face, Lunarisha, the elven spirit sorceress. And she teamed up with Alexis, chasing the journey together. Jed called himself both a swordsman and a porter, and when he saw her smile, his heart just couldn't take it. Tears streamed down his cheeks like they couldn't hold back. Tia blinked in shock. Why was he crying? Did she mess up somehow? But for Ed, it was all crystal clear. She's alive right in front of him, standing there like a miracle. She snapped at Alexis, "What did you do?" And he just shrugged like it was nothing. No alarms, no surprises, totally normal, and hey, he's insanely strong, so of course they let it slide. Maybe he's really not ordinary. Tia snapped at him for saying stuff like that, and Ed jumped up to defend the hero. For a guy like him, just hearing his name thrown into the hero's party hit like a lightning bolt, so Tia softly asked, "You didn't really offend him, did you?" "Hey, could we do something for him?" Ed blurted it out, just one request. She had to say his name one more time. "Please, is that too much trouble?" She said his name, Ed, and it instantly pulled him back to who he really was. Tia grinned and called him a weirdo to his face, and Ed just stood there overthinking it. Was this really supposed to feel like a win, hearing his name roll off her tongue? Alexis watched them like a hawk, and it hit him. No wonder Ed was crying. Ed just didn't get what it was all about. Alexis jabbed at the shattered plate, the very one Ed had fought to protect at all costs. The steak was ruined, and Ed's horror hit like a punch. He broke down again, grieving over the missing meat and cursing that moonlit sword, and Alexis joked, "Relax, it was just your steak." Tia snapped in pure outrage like, seriously, would it never be accepted? Even after he'd matched Alexis in strength, Alexis still didn't believe it. But Tia wouldn't back down. She swore he pulled off a special technique. And the crowd jumped in too, shouting that they'd seen it with their own eyes. Alexis, already fuming, snapped and demanded why Tia was defending Ed so hard. Didn't they already have plenty of fighting power? Tia lit up and insisted, "He's strong, so why not bring him along?" Alexis shot her a sharp look like, "Hello, do you even remember who the real hero is here?" Then she crushed the mood by calling him a bore and a non-stop grumbler. Then she spun toward Gonzo and he just blurted out the truth. Yeah, he didn't care at all, but asking someone to carry the burden and still fight like a blade is asking for the impossible, and Alexis knew it. He muttered a curse under his breath because he had to learn the muscle craft straight from Gonzo. Right then that hit him and he solemnly swore, "I'll forge a real warrior out of this sprout." Alexis shot back with, "You're a muscular fool." But he finally admitted it. Ed's technique is insane. And honestly, besides him, Ed might be the strongest person in the whole room. Alexis hurled something at him, and the moment it landed, the truth finally came spilling out. They don't need fresh fighters right now, they need a dependable cargo carrier. If Ed can juggle both jobs, then he's in. But first, they've got one last check. He has to buy everything they need. If he's truly the best courier on Earth, then let him prove it. Ed snatched the coin, and determination lit up his eyes like fire. Alexis snapped, "So how's he planning to spend that money? How's he gonna haul it all back?" Then she practically shoved him forward. "Go on, show me what you can do." Ed grinned and told them, "Trust me, I'll handle it all." Gonzo watched him and said he seemed solid and dependable, while Tia shot him a smile and wished him good luck, fully believing he'd pull it off. He let out a breath of relief, staring hard at the coins, 10 shining ones in all. For a second he swore it was that same silver from before, then he blinked and boom, they were gold coins. This threw him off. Alexis had handed him 10 silver coins before, but now he was getting way more than that, and it hit him like a question in his chest. Was this trust, or something bigger? Even a single gold coin would have felt like a huge statement. Right then, somebody remembered that legendary saying everyone quotes about this city. Surprise, wait, places like that are even in this city? It was Tia. She asked him what he was hunting for, but the moment he said nothing, irritation flashed across her face, because something had seriously messed with her. She told him that at first he spoke to her like it was nothing, but then boom, he switched gears and started acting respectful. Ed explained it plain and simple. In his eyes, she's a senpai. She waved her hand like, "Just call me Tia." Ed nodded and shot back, "So why you going with me?" She didn't beat around the bush. Curiosity. She wanted to see what he'd do once he had the money, and she even told him, "Don't be all formal with me." Ed wasn't sure chasing some random stranger just for curiosity was a smart move, but Tia just shrugged, because Ed had already faced a duel with Alexis and still stood tall. And yeah, she's way more than that. Don't trust first impressions. She's way stronger than she looks, and Ed can't help but glance at her, just awkwardly staring. Tia said she could just tell he was a good person, and Ed stood there, completely baffled. Yeah, Tia had always been friendly, but this kind of openness felt way too off because she'd never acted like this before. Maybe she remembers what went down in another life too. Right then, Gonzo came barreling up to Alexis, panic clawing at him. Tia had run off with Ed, and he feared the worst. Alexis insisted, if you've already decided what you'll do, then arguing or forbidding it is pointless. And honestly, even with him convinced he'd never do anything wrong, the whole thing still felt creepy as hell. She won't listen anyway, that's just how this free-spirited elf rolls. Gonzo grunted like, yeah, sounds right. Then Alexis pressed, is everything really running like the plan? He nodded hard, surprisingly, it really was. And right there, an old man hurried over, apologized, and offered to fix the messed-up furniture. Alexis pressed, asking the old man if he was really suggesting Alexis couldn't fix everything on his own. And just as Alexis started to explain, the grandfather cut in with a brutal rule. If you cause harm, you've got to pay for it. Alexis insisted he was doing it of his own free will, and the grandfather finally accepted that. Alexis stared at the table he'd just built, and when it came out surprisingly good, he nearly couldn't believe it. His gut feeling was right, because this boy was the real deal. The crowd roared with approval, praising the product and the hero's flawless taste, and they practically crowned him the way they'd been betting he would. Then Alexis grabbed Gonzo and said, time to go, because something in him was screaming that trouble was coming. Meanwhile, Tia kept her eyes on Ed, and she could tell he was lost in thought, while Ed stared back, wondering why Tia talked to him like they'd known each other forever, even though her worry felt way too intense and he just couldn't figure it out. Tia hesitated, couldn't find the words, and then stared at him with a serious, unwavering look. She dove right in. Elves live way longer than humans. She's already past 100 years old herself, and in all that time, plenty happened, and even more slipped into the forgotten pile. But some memories don't get to disappear. Elves carve them straight into the core of their souls, and somehow that still works, even without any supernatural power. Through death and rebirth, those moments cling to them, etched into their hearts like they were burned there by fire. The moment she locked eyes with a stranger, nostalgia would hit like a sudden memory. Then boom, the same wave crashed over her when she saw Ed. Ed froze. Wait, is this really deja vu? But it can't be just elves this time, so he asked her straight up if she actually believes in stuff like that. She hesitated and said, I'm not sure, but before they turned into who they are now, they'd already crossed paths, and something about it felt faded asterisk, like they were connected in a way no one could explain. Ed agreed, and if it was true, he wouldn't flinch for a second. He even looked ready to gladly hang out with her. Tia stared at him in shock, and he only grinned like everything was going to play out exactly how it should. Then Tia burst into laughter, calling him totally unreliable, but deep down, the questions wouldn't quit. Does the soul really remember? Does she tag along through every reincarnation? He had no clue, yet the fact that he's alive at all screams the truth. The future already happened. He's here right now, packed with every memory and skill he's got. And somewhere out in this world, that means a soul is about to wake up too. But how do we even prove that right now for real? Finally, they slammed into the place and stopped dead, completely stunned. Ed jabbed at the roof. Wasn't it cracked from the moon's sword? One of the locals nodded hard and admitted it. Ed had been trying to repair it for ages. Alexis glanced, and boom, everything was way simpler than he'd expected. His gut told him the truth, and this guy really was something special. Ed and Tia just couldn't believe it. Alexis spun around and faced them head-on. Tia blurted out, Ed is seriously incredible. They scanned the scene and realized there wasn't a single scrap of cargo in sight. And just like that, something smashed right in front of Alexis and Gonzo. Alexis snapped it into focus, gear, plain and simple, and right away it started dumping out supplies. 10 sets to last 3 months, plus 10 more that could sit on the shelf for a full year. Since Tia said the folks around here didn't live large, Ed only hauled in canned goods. Then Gonzo blurted, wait, where'd you get that bag? How did you carry all that? Ed just stayed cool and calmly explained. That bag was a magical relic pulled straight from the ruins, way bigger on the inside than it ever looks from the outside, and the moment Alexis heard about it, curiosity hit like lightning. Ed finally admitted it. He didn't even fully get how it worked, but the second he grabbed it, only he could use it, and everyone else was completely fooled because it was all nothing but a perfect lie. He added, if someone else grabs the bag, it turns ordinary. Tia chimed in, I even tried to crawl inside, but living beings can't pass through. What a buzzkill. Alexis burst out laughing and said, you're acting just like a cat. Ed let out a quiet sigh inside, thinking that when the exile finally hits, he'd blame it all on the artifacts, because the truth was darker. The bag didn't work on luck, it ran on his special exile power, ***, traveler's treasure. He had drilled a storage access point straight into the bag. Now he could palm it off like a real magical artifact. No one would bat an eye, not even the hero, because the truth was just a slick illusion in disguise. Curiosity got the better of Alexis, so she asked how much that bag could hold. Eddie just shrugged and said, maybe 2 or 3 warehouses. The truth? He had zero clue where its limits even were, and his own guess stretched to global scales, but he wasn't about to spill that. Tia blurts out, thrilled to the bone, seriously, even this much can last a whole year without refilling supplies. Isn't that insane? Alexis shoots her a grimace like, why does she sound so smug? She yanked another thing from the bag and slammed it onto the ground with a brutal, bone-rattling thud. It was a magical artifact that conjured pure water out of thin air. It's proof that even giant stuff can squeeze through a tiny hole in a bag. Alexis asked if Tia had already told Ed, and she said, yeah, he already knows. Alexis stared at the artifact and said it would cost a fortune, at least 5 gold coins. Then Tia just stood there, utterly stunned. He spun toward Ed. Why would he buy this? Ed shot back. Because as long as an artifact and mana exist, water won't stay anywhere, sure, even the desert gets flooded. Gonzo teased that Tia could summon water too, but Ed cut in with a serious snap. If she got sick or hurt, they'd be stranded without a source. And Alexis nodded, saying, yeah, that made perfect sense. Relying on one person to keep everyone alive is a ticking time bomb, and since Tia always comes through, everyone's dropped their guard. But Tia can't shake the sting of it. Are they really treating her like nothing more than a disposable utility? Alexis shut his eyes, let out a heavy sigh, and finally admitted Ed's choices deserved real respect. Then he pushed himself to his feet. Tia beamed and went right back to repeating how cool it was, and Alexis just grumbled, why does she have to act so smug? And right then, Gonzo blurted that he'd personally help Ed get to peak physical form, and even joked about doing reps with an adamantium weight. Ed froze, stunned that he still remembered that, and just as the words hit, Alexis suddenly noticed something. A sharp click snapped the silence, then he yanked his sword free and leaned in. So, did Ed go and buy one too? Alexis figured Ed would blow most of the money on new, brutal weapons, but this was laughably cheap, so did he really just give up? Ed shot back that it wasn't a real combat blade at all, just a temporary sword to reach the next city, and Alexis went wide-eyed. A next sword? What are you even talking about? Ed explained that, yeah, this isn't just experience and training anymore, he's collected a stack of treasures too. This is his second chance, his shot to wipe the slate clean and start over. Alexis pressed him again, so what are you really aiming at? Ed just grinned, he was already 6 whole months ahead of everybody else. The hero squad charged toward Adaramton, the city of miners and blacksmiths. Chimneys clawed at the sky and the air reeked of hot metal. Tia stared at it all, daydreaming about legendary blades, and boy, was she dead wrong. This city didn't crank out weapons, it churned out table silver like that was the real prize. A metallic clatter rang through the air and Tia leaned in with a joke. Maybe Ed's treasure was a magical knife that could make food taste insanely better. Ed's eyes went wide, totally confused, because he had no clue what she meant. Soon enough, they stumbled into a spot called the Silver Oven. Alexis stepped in and practically dragged Ed into it, demanding he spell out his plan. He insisted that every single claim stands on a rock-solid, reliable source, right down to the exact info he'd been given. A rockworm has burrowed into the mine and made it its home. The hall instantly went stone silent, and everyone's nerves spiked like lightning. Rockworms gulp every last scrap of silver, then carve lethal tunnels that could trigger a collapse on an absolutely insane scale, Ed recalled. In his past life, that worm sparked a full collapse after just 3 months. People died by the dozens, and the whole city crumbled into despair and decline. They showed up too late, 3 more months dragged by, and by then the tragedy had already struck. But now it's game over for the old plan, everything's about to flip. This time Ed is going to strike first, not last. Alexis shot him a question. Why didn't he warn the authorities sooner, since the knights should have already been on their way? But in Edda there was nothing to prove, just cold words, and that was the whole point. He wanted those guys to be the ones who would wipe out the worm, and he burst out laughing because it wasn't only about stopping a catastrophe. Alexis stared at him, and suddenly it all started to click. Could the treasure Ed was talking about be mithril? He just flashed a smile and gave nothing away, yet that silence screamed louder than any answer. Tia leaned toward Gonzo, eyes wide. So, what's the deal with rockworms and mithril? Gonzo shrugged like it was nothing. Ask Ed. But Tia froze, terrified to barge in on Ed's serious talk with Alexis. Alexis leaned in and asked if they knew what mithril was. Tia shot back with total confidence. It's a rare metal that drinks in magic and stores mana like its fuel. It's the secret forge for building ruthless magical gear and upgraded weapons that hit like a storm. Then she grinned and said it shone beautifully. Alexis burst out laughing and begged Ed to explain it the right way. Her answer wasn't wrong, it just left out the key part. Turns out it's way more complicated. Silver gets hit with ruthless magic for ages, and that's how it finally morphs into mithril. Tia darted through the clues, so the mines drenched in mana. Ed shot that down, but Tia wouldn't let go. What if the worm itself was the source? Ed finally admitted she was only halfway to the truth. I fired back, so what do rockworms even munch on? She said, metals, especially ore. Then I asked, so what metal gets mined right here? Silver. I leaned in and asked the big question, then where does all that magic intensity come from? Her answer hit like a punchline, from the worm itself. Ed explained that to turn silver into mithril, it has to soak in magic for a long time. Then he hit the kicker. If a worm swallows that silver and its whole body gets saturated with mana, the transformation's perfect environment is already inside its gut. More precisely, it's right there in his stomach, because mithril isn't a normal mineral at all. It's digested, magically enriched silver left behind by a worm. Tia went still, replaying how she just stared in awe at Mithril's beauty, and then Alexis snapped her back to the truth. Ed wants to kill that worm and grab the mithril, but why? For what purpose? Ed shot back instantly, determined to forge the party's finest weapon for the heroes. Near the mine, one guy was freaking out, wondering if it was even safe to go back, while the other grabbed him and worked to calm him down. Then the senior boss suddenly roared at them. Who told you it was okay to come back? You were all supposed to clear out of the mine. One of the miners shot back. The evacuation order was signed by the hero himself. A day ago, the mine's access got slammed shut. Everyone had to get out fast, no questions. They promised the damages would be covered, so tell me, what in the world are the heroes doing inside right now? In the depths of the Gonzo mine, doubt started clawing at everyone. Was there really a worm down here? The silence was eerie. Alexis shot back. Maybe its feeding zone is still ahead, if Ed isn't lying. Alexis leaned in and asked Tia if she was still seething, and she shot back that mithril still comes the usual way, so why on earth use that nasty method? Ed had to admit it was kinda gross, but honestly, it was pretty fascinating. Why not just buy mithril? She pushed. Ed snapped back, yeah, sure, but the mithril pulled from that worm is the special kind. She blinked, still not getting what made it so different. Alexis broke it down. The silver had to survive the worm's acid, get stripped clean of every impurity, until only pure mithril remained. That mithril could forge weapons of insane quality. Tia asked Alexis if he wanted something for himself, and he just waved her off. Nah, I'm good. I already have a holy sword. Tia felt her pride get crushed, and Alexis whipped back to Ed. Are we even on the right track? Ed nodded and grinned, saying it was all thanks to his exiled skill, Akashic Compass. Gonzo beamed, praising it like a cheat code, a compass that points to legendary creatures. Too bad it only works for Ed, but Gonzo just shrugged and laughed, saying he pulled it straight out of a magical bag. And then he grinned, thinking, yeah, there's definitely some truth to that. Only he could pull off that skill. Tia, totally hooked, leaned in and asked where those ruins were, the ones where he'd found the bag and compass. Ed dodged the question with a cold grin, saying it was a secret, then they pushed on down the road. Finally, the compass snapped to attention. Bingo, they'd made it. Tia spun around, dead end, no way out. Was there a worm hiding behind that wall? Ed nodded, and they both knew they'd have to smash straight through the rocks. Gonzo was itching to flex, but Ed yanked the plan away. No digging. Ed would handle it all himself. Tia stared in shock because how was he even going to do that? Ed slammed up to the wall and hit his exile skill, ***, circular reflector. Gonzo had zero clue what was going on. Tia was terrified that Ed would get hurt, but Gonzo stepped in and soothed her fear. This move lets you soak up power from every physical hit, then blast it out as a crushing shockwave. So Ed started stomping into the wall, hoarding energy with each kick. Tia panicked and spun to Alexis, pleading for him to stop, but he grabbed her back because he had to see what happened next. Ed poured every last ounce of strength into a single strike, then slammed his foot into the wall with raw power, quietly calling the creature forth. The ground shook under their boots, and Alexis snapped into action on the spot. He rang the alarm and ordered everyone to hit full combat readiness. Get ready, fight now, the order cracked through the air, sharp and certain. Gonzo snapped his head up at the noise, threw himself into a defensive stance, and shielded the others like a wall. For me, he roared. The cave shook with a thunderous roar, and then it hit. This time, the monster was finally here. In the middle of the chaos, Ed yanked Tia into his arms and planted himself in front of her, ready to take the blow. Gonzo snapped a spell into place, an explosive fire sphere, screaming with ritual words, poised to incinerate absolutely everything in its path. Ed felt the sheer force of that spell smash through the air. Then he remembered the sword barely cut enemies like this, and Alexis nodded along in total silence. Tia snapped into spell mode, chanting Lainarishi and unleashing the volcanic land spell. The magical weapon slammed into its target, and a brutal explosion roared through the mine, rattling the walls like they were seconds from collapsing. The worm shrieked and thrashed in pure agony, then it suddenly went still. But Gonzo cut in fast. This isn't finished. The essence was clawing at the ceiling, trying to force its way through. He'd been waiting for this. Right as he launched, he dropped in from above, took aim, and mocked the worm midair. "Think you can slip away? Forget it. I'm not letting you save yourself," he seethed, bracing for the final hit. Ed triggered the magic technique Blood Blade Forging, and his sword blazed with deadly, fiery light. A massive blast lit up the mine all over again. Tia and the others snapped their heads up in shock because Ed was hovering in midair. His figure blazed with that extended sword, and Gonzo blurted, "Is this the end?" But Tia felt it in her bones. Something was seriously off. She screamed for Gonzo to yank Ed out, and he just nodded. Then asterisk splat, splish asterisk, this crazy wet splashing sound burst into the air. A worm wriggled out from the inside, slick with slime from head to toe, and he groaned as the stink hit, like rotten fish. Alexis grinned and said, "Yeah, you got eaten." Ed just shrugged like it was no surprise, but knowing it didn't make it any less nasty. Tia lunged into his arms and squeezed him hard, tears streaming as she panicked that he'd been hurt. "It's not my blood," Ed chuckled, assuring her. "It's Worm S." "Idiot," she snapped, eyes blazing. "You could have died." "But I'm alive," Ed snapped back, relief and fury in his voice, because if he hadn't gambled, he would have slipped away and vanished. "And then it hit me." Tia felt the exact same way the first time too. She's always been like that. Her worry didn't budge. She's still the same Tia. Ed apologized for scaring her, then admitted he trusted himself and did what he felt had to be done. He swore he'd get even stronger so she'd never have to worry again, and just like that, the danger finally faded away. And he hoisted the loot up high, one massive chunk of pure mithril gleaming like treasure from another world. Tia sucked in a breath over that gorgeous mithril, even though she knew where it came from, and Gonzo was blown away. A worm that enormous, and yet they only got that little bit of material. But Alexis snapped, "This is plenty. I've never laid eyes on mithril this good," and Gonzo froze, stunned. Tia asked, "How much does it cost?" Alexis shot back, "That, you could buy a whole castle with that," and the room went dead silent. He made it crystal clear this stuff is one of a kind, and if you want to use it right, you'd better have the best blacksmith in the world. Tia stared in disbelief at the one-piece price tag, and Gonzo only had one thought: how many training weapons he could have grabbed instead. Then Alexis let out a sigh and told him, once again, to calm down. Alexis shot a look at the mithril and fired off, asking Ed whether he'd tracked down a blacksmith who could forge weapons from it, only for Ed to be completely caught off guard that Alexis was the one steering the conversation. Then out of nowhere he blurted a confession. He was actually a skilled blacksmith and planned to forge it himself. Alexis stood there, totally stunned by every word. At last they burst into the forge. He stared at the gear and tools like they were treasure, then nervously blurted, "Can I use them?" The blacksmith just gave a steady nod. After all, the hero had already covered every cost and even saved the city. So yeah, the man thought he should have given the forge away for free. But Alexis snapped back, saying taking that kind of generosity would be dead wrong. The owner's jaw dropped, realizing just how noble the hero really was. Then Alexis snapped toward Ed, "All right, listen up. Now." The whole room was set up exactly the way he asked, and now it's Ed's turn. Now Ed can finally kick things off. But Alexis snapped a warning: if Ed handled this carelessly, all their hard work would crumble to nothing. Still, Ed trusted him. Ed nodded like he already knew he'd pull it off. A sharp look snapped between them, pure determination locked in, like they both decided the same thing at the exact same moment. Alexis waved Gonzo and Tia forward. Then, as they stepped out, he caught Tia staring at Ed, cheeks flushed with a full-on blush. Alexis said, "Looks like she's got a full-on crush on him," and Tia shuddered like it hit her skin. He remembered how Tia could spot anyone instantly, never once messing up during interviews or shopping. But what if this time she liked Ed a little more than she had any right to? Tia fired back, "Do you really believe that? Why? Alexis didn't answer, he just stared at her in silence. Later, the heroes crammed into the tavern and slid up to the bar, trading loud theories about everything that just happened. After a few mugs, Gonzo leaned in on Alexis and snapped, "So you're really blaming Tia for loving Ed?" "Actually," Gonzo shot back, "it's you who's latched onto him the hardest. You dragged the whole party to this city just because of him, and now you're trusting him way too much. Tell me, what does that all say about you?" Gonzo cut in, "Trusting people has always been brutal for you, right from the start." Alexis stared into his glass for a long moment, then finally blurted it out. He'd been keeping a sharp eye on Ed since day one. Ed isn't just a razor-sharp swordsman on par with him, he's also packing mysterious artifacts, and his deep knowledge of monsters, magic, and the world makes him invaluable to Alexis. Yeah, maybe he really does like Ed just a little. Gonzo cracked up like, "That's so totally you, don't hold back." While everyone else was gone, only Ed and Tia stayed inside the forge, so Ed cracked a suggestion. "Take a breather, because watching metal being hammered has to be torture, right?" Tia grinned, saying, "I'm not here to forge, I just want to see you," and Ed's eyes widened. "Why do you keep staring at me?" Tia only nodded, soft and steady. "Right when I'm standing right beside you, it's like you've got the power to do anything," Tia said. "But that's not true," Ed hissed under his breath, like the words were fighting him, because he knew there were plenty of things he just couldn't pull off. "I lost the most precious thing of all, something that looked so easy to hold onto, and still, it slipped away again and again. But this time, everything's about to change, because I got a second chance. And I'll use it. Every lesson I earned with my own hands will stand by me and never betray a soul. I'm carving my own future, and I'm flipping the ending for good. I'm going to forge a sword that bends fate with every swing." Ed had no clue, but trouble was already locking in. One lone eye stared at him from the shadows. Soon, another presence slid up to him. Saiyan yawned, stretched, and grumbled about how stiff his body felt. Then the eye chimed in. The hero was here, he'd wiped out the stone worms, and he snagged Mithril. Saiyan murmured, eyes narrowing, "Pure Mithril, so that means." "So yeah, it makes everything messier, but at least he won't have to face it himself. His job was just recon. First things first, he had to haul that report straight to the Demon Lord." A flash of memory hit him right before the second round. He'd hauled Tia on his back and grilled her about the carrier who'd vanished, so who was that guy? Tia shot back that, at first glance, he looked totally ordinary, and then she even dropped his name. Right then, a blasting bell ripped through the air and drowned out her sentence, so all she could manage was, "And he's got the most expressive nose." Tia snapped awake again, same nightmare, same life that had never belonged to her. Then she saw herself beside Ed in a world she didn't recognize, but somehow knew by heart. She couldn't figure out why the same dream kept replaying in her head, even though she'd only known Ed for a short time. Then Ed realized she'd snapped awake and he rushed to apologize. Tia flashed a soft smile, and then she apologized for nodding off mid-moment. Ed told her to lie down like normal, but she snapped and refused because that first second kept replaying in her mind. Ed saw her and broke down, tears pouring out, and even though she never said a word, it hit her soul like a thunderclap. Sitting right beside him felt weirdly warm, like the world finally slowed down, cozy, safe, and bright. She smiled and said she'd stick around a bit longer because she just wanted to watch. Ed grinned through the grind, wiping sweat off his brow. Then a sudden memory hit him like a punch. He snapped. There was no time to drag every treasure and those travel journals he'd hoarded for 100 years along with him, so he had to forge a brand new sword from nothing. But every bit of power he earned, his strength, his memory, his hard-won experience, stuck to him like it was part of his soul. Right then, the wrist compass started buzzing and Ed stared at it, completely lost, like, what am I even supposed to do with this? From the shadows, they kept staring at him, Sane locked onto every single move Ed made, wondering if this kid was really the one causing the heroic party's terrifying disturbances. The eye flashed, yes, it was him, Ed. Sane's memory snapped back. The data said Ed was only a carrier, so why was he out there forging weapons right now? This didn't fit anything they expected. The eye demanded they kill him, but Sane wouldn't because they had to watch first. Then the eye pushed back. Why? Sane snapped. Yeah, he could slip into a human form, but it would always give him away, and getting exposed would torch every plan he had. The eye sneered. It can morph into anything except his face. You're sloppy. Then Sane shifted in a flash, reminded everyone he was a higher being, and demanded respect. As a lizard form snapped into place, Saiyan decided, first, I'll dig up a little more info, and he commanded the eye to stay right where it was. Meanwhile, the blacksmith's forge went dead silent. Ed already finished. In just 6 days, Ed confirmed it. No time for food or sleep, he'd barely stopped. Alexis shot back, and you honestly think this will impress me? No, Ed said, cool as ice. I've forged the perfect weapon. Gonzo burst into laughter. Stop all the bragging and show us. Ed cut them off because this demo needed a very special place. Tia just watched the compass land in someone's hands and she snapped, wait, why would we use something that points us to magical creatures? Ed held up a hand and said, give me a second to explain. As he started to unveil the weapons, Sane didn't miss a beat. 3 things hit the table: a sword, a glove, and a silver staff, so that's what the mithril was forged for. Sane leaned in and confessed to the occupant that he couldn't stop thinking about these 3 pure mithril artifacts. Sure, the sacred sword was something, but the others? They tugged at him, waking a restless itch he couldn't silence. He knew he had to dig deeper into what was going on. Then, right when he least expected it, something blew the moment open. Ed just smiled at him. Sane's eyes snapped wide as he demanded, am I exposed, or is this just luck? No, no way, that stare was dead on. Ed definitely clocked me. He slammed the eye to a hold and immediately shifted his shape. The eye clocked the order and vanished into a shadow bat, and Sane knew the Demon King's report couldn't wait a single second. Ed sensed something wildly wrong the moment he showed up, so wrong it even left the hero himself unsettled, since he'd never felt Sane's presence before. So tell me, did this newcomer notice it too? But the scariest part wasn't any threat, it was Ed's stare. It was pure predator eyes, sizing someone up like prey. And yeah, that was insane, because Sane wasn't the one on the menu. He was born to hunt, yet none of this made a lick of sense. Then, out of nowhere, a sudden hit tore through his shape. Bam, the shadow bat had struck. A thunderous blast tore the air apart. He got hit. Sane shrieked, that's an ice arrow, the spirit's magic. But how? From that far? No way. Then out of the shadows, a cool, confident figure stepped forward. Ed. He calmly greeted Sane, called him General, and said he'd been dreaming of meeting him for ages. Ed totally didn't expect to spot Sane this soon, but it was such a relief seeing him okay. And then Sane just froze in shock because Ed knew his name. Ed smirked like he was begging forgiveness. Wait, is this still supposed to be a secret? Then shot the truth right back. Don't bother pretending because Sai already knows. Right before Sai could even speak, the rest of the heroic crew surged over. Gonzo leaned in and asked how it went. Ed grinned and declared the shot flawless, and Sai froze in shock. Ed then raved about Tia, saying landing a strike from that far was unreal, and Tia just laughed like it was nothing. Sane's stomach dropped as the truth hit. Someone had been watching him the whole time. Gonzo fired back that it had to be a demon scout. Ed didn't even blink and said, straight up, that reconnaissance is a big deal. Tia snapped, so what do we do now? And Sane spiraled into full panic. He scrambled to insist he wasn't the enemy, then introduced himself as the Demon King's messenger, and that's when it hit her like lightning. The hero wasn't here. He even swore the message was meant just for the hero. Tia found herself a little intrigued. Sane said, this is a proposal, our shared future. Then Ed grinned even harder, there won't be a hero. Alexis was busy driving the civilian evacuation, and that left Edu totally free to make his move. He declared this future for Sane and burst into laughter because he didn't come to build it at all. Then wipe it out right here, right now. Tia stared at Ed in silence, feeling the iron will in his eyes, and Sane fidgeted with a nervous grin. Kill, destroy the future, that's way too ruthless for some regular guy, especially without a hero. Who the heck do you think you are, talking like that? Sane's transformed and daring Ed to prove it. Does Ed really think he can stare at him with that bloodthirsty gleam? Sane bellowed the spell Horn of Death and kept chanting kill like a war prayer. His body contorted and ballooned, and in the blink of an eye, a towering, grotesque nightmare filled the space before them. Tia snapped her gaze upward, stunned. Was this really Sane's true form? And Ed realized Alexis hadn't ordered evacuation for nothing. It was the one move that mattered most. Gonzo steps up and snaps to it. Sane isn't some scout, he's a real threat, so this has to be handled smart. Sane snarls, claws out, and says it with his whole body. Gonzo will be the first one he crushes. A massive blast rips through the air. Gonzo doesn't even hesitate, activating a magical barrier on the spot, and Ed and Tia leap onto the blazing circle, right on top of the preset magical array. The Saiyan roars like a storm, pure hatred blazing in his chest. He won't forgive them for the disappearances, for stealing his power, and now that he's finally shown his true face, everything's about to explode. He won't stop until the whole city is nothing but ash, dead silent, burning to the ground. He unleashes a furious storm of attacks, and Tia thrusts up a barrier, sealing herself behind a shield against the sheer wreckage. She quizzes Gonzo, can that barrier actually take this kind of hit? Gonzo smirks, nodding like it's nothing. He's got this. Then, without hesitation, he slams the shield back on. The strike erupts like a monster surge of pure lightning, and all three huddle behind Gonzo's barrier, praying it holds. Sane's blood turns to ice as he realizes the truth. This isn't a normal defense at all. It's a city-wide wall of magic wrapping the entire place, and there's no way something this huge is even possible. In his intel report, there wasn't a single clue, none, about an enemy this powerful. Tia watched Ed and Gonzo lock in at the front line, grinning as she whispered, "Just like I said, those are our Ed and Gonzo." From up high, Alexis stares down at the clash, then it hits him hard. What if that brand new weapon really could have flipped the whole battle? His mind snaps back once again to Ed. Gonzo clamps on the new combat gloves and Ed double-checks everything, then shouts the command, "Pump the mana straight into his fists." Gonzo strikes his move and suddenly his body lights up with raw power. On the other side, the Saiyan in his monstrous form roars with rage. How dare humans resist? Then Gonzo unleashes all that stored power in one brutal strike. Watch it obliterate everything. Zane's eyes snapped wide with shock as the attack slammed into its target dead on. With one brutal strike, his massive hand got hacked clean off in an instant. Tia gasped at the massive wreckage and Gonzo lit up, shouting that this was real power. Then he praised Ed and the brand new weapon. He declared that his muscles had finally hit their peak, so strong they felt like they were 1 second away from exploding with raw power. But right beneath Gonzo's victory, panic and confusion erupted insane. Because even with the hero and the sacred sword gone, this party still carried a colossal amount of power. And that's why Ed, they couldn't brush him off, not even once. Sane had to fight for his life, because he couldn't drop the mission until he delivered this straight to the Demon King. A deafening explosion tore through the air and Gonzo's eyes went wide. He actually thought Sane blew himself up. But Ed instantly caught it. That blast was just a smoke screen. He claimed Sane didn't self-destruct at all. He bared his teeth and chose escape instead, then crawled underground as a giant worm, swearing he'd slip out before anyone could catch him. But he was dead wrong. Tia's voice snapped through the air. Stone spell. She spotted him and tore him loose from the ground. Stone shackles still clamped that worm-like body. Cool as ice, she told him, "You can't fool Ed's eyes." And her blade, gifted by him, cut through every lie. A plain old sword could be supercharged with spirit magic, letting elemental power burst out with every hit. So Gonzo blurted, shocked out of his mind, could Tia really handle magic that strong? She brushed it off and said it was just a regular stone spell until Ed's sword flipped it into something totally different. When the dust finally cleared, Ed stepped toward the bound Sane, slow and unshaken, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Ed already knew every move Sai was making and exactly what came next. Even if death tried to erase him or a new life tried to replace him, regret still clung on. This was Ed's moment of atonement. Sai stood there, stunned, completely lost about what it meant. But Ed refused to explain, and honestly, it didn't matter if anyone understood. Out of nowhere, Sane whipped up a brutal whirlwind, yanking Ed straight toward a deadly trap, but Ed was already prepared, and he whispered. From the far-off future, those wings unfurl, then the silver wing sword kicks on, deployment 12. Next bam, 12 straight lightning strikes lit up the sky. The ethereal sword wings blaze through the air as Ed glides with razor-precise control, steering the power with his palm and sealing it with one final, devastating slash. The wall sat stone still, holding every secret tight. Then Ed stared at his own palm. Is that really it? He blurted the words out, is it really over? And right then Tia and Gonzo came sprinting up, demanding to know if he was okay. Ed just nodded. The dust has barely settled, and it's already over. With a little swagger, Ed asked if they liked his sword and his technique, and the moment the question landed, both of them burst into laughter, teasing him. So you're showing off, huh? Then Tia crept up to the worm, eyeing it like it had something to hide, because it looked totally unharmed, and Ed urged them to take a closer look. Alexis peered down from above and said, that strike left a mark so faint you'd miss it, like the creature could have dropped dead without realizing it had been opened up. Tia and Gonzo were stunned. Alexis shot back, this only works when both the sword and the swordsman are true masters. Ed just burst into laughter and said it was a quick, temporary trick, something you do in a rush. You haven't even reached the peak yet. But Alexis didn't laugh. He snapped that the hero's title isn't for show and no blacksmith on earth can forge a blade like this, so when Ed calls it hasty, you can almost hear the doubt crack. Alexis didn't waste time, she confronted him straight on. Ed, who are you really? What are you hiding? Ed went still inside. Did Alexis somehow catch the real truth? That twist left him scratching his head because Alexis hit him with answers way more blunt than he thought. Then doubt started chewing at his guts like maybe he'd confessed too much. Alexis stared at Ed's weapon. At first it looked like a normal mithril staff, but then something felt wrong, like it was hiding a secret. It looked harmless, then boom, it turned into a razor-sharp blade, somehow slicing through the mystery, and Ed immediately knew his suspicions were right. The mithril sword shimmered with wing-like spikes on one side, and those edges flared out into a razor-thin blade on the other. Once fully activated, 12 wings burst out and the blade got insanely razor-sharp. But after that, it hit its breaking point. The structure turned fragile, and one tiny hit could make it crumble. Ed admitted to himself that this wasn't pure magic. If he'd used the master blacksmith's forbidden skill, it might have gone way better. But right then, he just smiled and loudly praised Alexis's sharp, piercing insight. Alexis fired the question again, but this time she phrased it sharp. "So, Ed, what heights do you dream of reaching as a blacksmith?" Ed froze, and it hit him hard. He just slipped and revealed something crucial. To buy himself time, Ed started pitching a wild old dream: forge a sword that could slice through anything. But the sentence died before it ever finished. Alexis brushed it off as a typical dream, then immediately snapped, "Ed really capable of forging a weapon like that?" Tia blinked in shock at why he even thought that. Alexis said Ed didn't call that sword a prototype or an experiment. He called it a temporary solution. Like, this is just the stopgap, because he was already planning to forge something way better. So why did he settle for a temporary solution? Like, was he out of time, materials, or equipment? Ed paused for a beat, then nodded honestly. Forging the perfect blade under their rules was a fantasy, because the real problem was the raw material. You can't buy that kind of stuff off the market. You've got to earn it the smart way. Still, Ed knew the ugly truth. Most of what he needed was buried in other worlds, and that was the real problem. Alexis swallowed that answer and accepted it. "I steered the talk straight to the busted wall of the city. This thing had to be fixed now. With Ed backing me, it'd be a breeze," until Tia jumped in. She told Alexis to wait, swearing she and Gonzo could fix the repairs themselves. Then sweat broke out on her forehead. Alexis blinked in surprise, catching that intense look in her eyes. Tia didn't even answer, she just yelled Gonzo and bolted, and Gonzo grumbled but chased after her. Ed tried to step in, but Alexis cut him off. He had one more offer on the table: talk to him in private, in his room. Ed felt the pressure closing in, and without thinking, he clenched his sword's hilt until his grip turned rock solid. While the wall's breach yawned below, Tia launched into her incantation above it, calling out, "Lunaris, hand of the earth," and the ground erupted with a thunderous tremor. A colossal hand, crafted from stone and earth, broke up through the ground like a nightmare coming alive. By the time the crowd realized what they were seeing, an elf from the heroic squad, everyone went still in pure shock. Tia spotted the chaos, bowed her head, and apologized for the damage, then swore she'd fix it. The onlookers burst into applause right away, like, "You don't even need to apologize." The heroes held the city line, that was all that mattered. Their voices rang with pure gratitude. Then one guy blurted out that spirit magic was basically a miracle and promised he'd be cheering for Tia, but she just smiled and said it was simply their duty. The townspeople erupted with hope. If the heroes keep charging forward with that same heart, even the demon lord won't be able to hold them back, and their stubborn determination lit a path forward. Tia shot back with full confidence, saying they'd drive out the chaos and bring peace to this world for real. With that kind of backup, the demon lord doesn't stand a chance. The crowd goes wild, erupting in applause and screaming they've crushed the army of demons, and then one guy just can't help it. "I told you so." Gonzo burst in, hauling a monstrous boulder like it was nothing. And then he smugly bragged that the weakling couldn't even touch his strength, and that even the demon lord would crumble before it. The whole crowd went wide-eyed and gasped in pure awe. Gonzo placed the stone with total precision, and Tia's face lit up, because, yeah, he was the living proof of dependable brute strength. He gently stroked her head, and confidence flooded into her like a spark. Their victories kept stacking higher, but with every win, the pressure climbed too, because that's the price heroes always have to carry. As long as Gonzo stayed by her side, Tia didn't have to fake strength anymore. She grinned like she finally understood she was safe. Gonzo jumped in and said that ever since Ed showed up, their whole team got razor strong. So Tia, don't stress, because together they're going to crush the demon lord. She thanked him, and Gonzo lit up with a big, heartfelt grin. And then it hit him, wait, where are Ed and Alexis? Tia already looked like she knew what they'd pull, and over in Alexis's chambers the mood turned ice cold. He even pressed Ed for a cup of black tea. Ed stood there totally thrown off. This whole thing felt ominously wrong. Alexis had invited him herself, acted polite, even talked in that suspiciously gentle way, and it made his skin crawl. Then the hero confessed the tea was made from leftover ingredients, like it might not even sit right with him, so Ed tried to shrug it off, but the worry just kept swelling. And honestly, it felt like they were quietly setting him up to get kicked out again. He swallowed those thoughts and pressed straight into it. Why was he called that? The whole thing tugged at old wounds, like the days they threw him out. Alexis answered without dodging, dead honest. He wasn't just saying it, he wanted to show something. He yanked the holy weapon out and shoved it into Edu's hands, because it was the first time he'd ever been allowed to touch it, and the shock hit hard. Before this, Alexis had snarled and fiercely banned anyone else from even getting near it. He hesitated, asking, "Wait, is that even possible?" But before the words fully left his mouth, the sword immediately tipped him off to something deeply, strangely wrong. Alexis shot him a question, and Ed finally cracked, admitting that the blade truly was legendary, worthy of every rumor, but before he could finish, Alexis cut him off mid-sentence. If that sword is really this legendary, then what does it actually earn the title of a holy weapon? Ed swallowed his nerves and thought, technically yeah, but in my bones no. Even with a master blacksmith's skill, he could only copy something close, never a holy weapon. Alexis nodded like he'd already figured it out, then Ed finally laid the truth bare. That's not a holy weapon, it's just the finest blade ever forged by human hands, and yeah, it's a forgery. Ed's eyes went wide, because even if they poured out every last power the master had, they'd only get something that looked the same, not the real deal, so he snapped. Why? Then he pressed harder. So where's the true holy weapon? Alexis finally admitted he had no clue. Then the whole world turned into a search engine, with global hunts launching and dozens of teams tearing off into the unknown, and still nothing. Not a single lead. The truth hits hard. This sword isn't the real deal. It's just a stand-in, a quick replacement made to keep hope alive until the real blade finally shows up. If the Demon Lord discovers the real truth, he'll be the first to uncover the true weapon, and humanity's last hope will vanish. Alexis had been backing this lie for years, but the blade was already hanging on the edge. Alexis was certain of one thing: nobody else could pull off something this perfect, until now. He stared at Ed and shot a straight question. Could he forge a sword even deadlier than the one in front of them? Ed admitted it, using every ounce of an exile's experience and skill. Maybe he could do it, but it would still be a copy, not a real holy weapon. Still, Alexis threw all his faith in him. Alexis dropped to her knees right in front of him. That gesture blew Ed's mind. Then the hero stepped up and demanded a tool worthy of the title, swearing he'd bring everything they'd need. The materials, the tools, anything at all. He didn't plead for himself, he demanded the mission of a true hero. Ed lunged in to stop him, insisting a hero shouldn't kneel to someone like him. But Alexis shot back that he'd bow as much as he had to. The weight of all humanity's fate crushes him. If he falls, the whole world falls with him. Fists clenched, head bowed, he still stands his ground, and Ed can't wrap his mind around how he made it this far. They shoved this path onto him, Alexis, a victim turned banner where everyone pinned their hopes. But he still threw himself back into the fight, quietly admitting to himself, he's different. Special, he could grab anything he wanted just by wishing for it, and that was his whole deal. The living embodiment of hope, a blazing symbol of what's coming next. And now he leaned in and begged Ed for one chance, just one, so he could keep carrying this hope forward and finally live up to being a hero. And that's when everything finally clicked into place. Alexis carried his pride like a banner, noble, not because he thought he was better, but because the duty was heavy and real. The gods didn't pick him, they just had to admit he was already chosen, already a hero, so they had to choose him too. Ed fessed up that he'd judged him wrong before, and then he said, "Maybe my work isn't worthy of a real hero yet, but I'm not done. I'm still hunting for the true holy weapon." He snatched the Akashi compass right out of the chaos. Alexis stared. Wait, isn't that supposed to sniff out demons? Ed dropped his head, admitting the lie. Yeah, I've got secrets. If word got out what the compass really was, they'd throw him out again, but after seeing Alexis dig in and refuse to back down, he finally felt he couldn't keep quiet. Ed shot Alexis a grin and asked, "So you're hunting the direction to the holy weapon, huh? If that's true, I've got you. My services are super affordable. Price?" And just like that, after the Demon Lord was crushed and peace finally returned, Alexis didn't even think twice. He agreed on the spot. Alexis signed on, swore he'd pay the price, and told Ed, "Take me to where that holy weapon is waiting." And right then, the hero finally got it. Ed wasn't just some blacksmith. Alexis said his name straight to his face, no titles, no fuss. Because the one he bowed to, there was no way he was just an assistant. Ever since Gonzo and Tia, Ed finally earned his spot as a real partner, fully in the heroic crew, so Alexis made it official. Ed froze for a split second, then snapped into a bow, because this time he didn't just go along with it. He accepted the new role and for the first time called him by name Alexis. And finally, Ed jumped in as a true equal among the heroes at the party. Meanwhile, crowds gathered to stare at the restored wall, and it wasn't just fixed, it was rebuilt so solid it looked even tougher than before. Everyone stared in disbelief. Tia pulled it off in a single day. They thanked her, begged her to stay, but she already had her next destination locked in. To show their gratitude, the whole city banded together and raised a small statue in her honor. Every single resident helped make it happen. Ed and Gonzo could barely hold their laughter as they stared at the monument, while everyone swore they'd never forget Tia's feat, no matter they hadn't even seen it themselves. Alexis had her back, and then Tia blurted in shock, "Wait, why is all this fame only for me?" Alexis tossed out a joke about slapping on rainbow lights, and the master sculptor practically jumped at the idea. While Tia's face burned, she begged them to stop because this was officially way too much. Then Alexis shoved the initiative to Edu and practically begged him to take the lead. Edu didn't hesitate, straight up owning the responsibility with full confidence. So they took off hunting the true holy weapon, with the Akashi compass pointing them the right way, but not how far they had to go. The road ahead was a total mystery and packed with danger. They had to keep charging ahead, no stopping, plowing through mountains, forests, and filthy swamps. Then the compass pointed them straight into a cave, and it slammed shut as a dead end, just another twist in the ride. For Ed, this journey felt like a dream come true because it let him finally see the lands he'd once lost. 3 long months flew by, and then, at last, they pushed through the northern mountains and reached the misty forest beyond. Gonzo felt like they'd already been through this place, but Ed snapped that the route was right. They just kept pushing through. Thick fog slammed back at even the spirit's magic, so Ed turned to Tia and demanded she show where it was coming from. Turns out the whole forest was wrapped in illusion magic. Try to break it, and it snaps right back with a fresh trick every single time. And that fog, it didn't just sit there, it reacted to someone or something out there. Maybe it all happened because Alexis was here. This place seemed to snap to his presence like it knew him. Everyone stared at the hero, and when he nodded, it hit them. Yeah, they'd found the right place at last. Gonzo snapped into caution, remembering the trap from before with Tia, and she shot back, annoyed that this cave had looked totally believable. She whipped around to Ed for backup, and he knew it. This time they were absolutely dialed in. Right in front of them, a jaw-dropping stage loomed. Massive statues of night guardians stood watch like living legends. Then right at the heart of it all sat the holy weapon. Its power hit you like a shockwave. Ed shot a look at Alexis, and out poured a prophecy. Deep inside the pure spring lies the hero's strength, and suddenly everything clicked into place. Only a true hero who's already walked this path could spot the sword, so that's why nobody has found it yet. Tia and Gonzo stared straight at Alexis. They shoved him forward. The moment was finally here. Ed grinned, eyes locked on the unfolding scene, while Alexis felt it hit them. This was the turning point. He thanked Ed because without him, none of this would have happened. Ed just reminded him of the promise, don't make the sword wait. Alexis was right on the verge of taking it, then he froze. What if Ed tries? He wondered. If that sword only bows to a real hero and Ed yanks it free, maybe that's the proof he's the one. Ed's thoughts raced, tight and unbreakable, like logic made of iron. Because this chance was 1 in a million, Ed jumped at it, and Gonzo wasted no time. He blurted out that he was in too. Tia lit up on the spot and threw her hat in the ring as well. He lunged for the sword, slid his hand onto the hilt, and for a split second he even toyed with a carrier box to shift the platform, but he shut that idea down. Too unfair. Then he yanked, and the blade didn't budge an inch. Then Gonzo shoved forward, every muscle snapped tight, his grip locked down on the handle, and he yanked with everything he had. He heaved, roared, screamed his effort out, and the sword still wouldn't budge. Gonzo let out a weary sigh and stepped aside. Then Tia bolted forward, all smiles, grabbed the sword and froze because she hit nothing but failure. Alexis just sighed like it was inevitable. Tia snapped, offended, and called him a nuisance. Alexis inched forward, the sword waiting there in silence. He extended his finger and let it brush the tip. Nothing happened. Everyone froze, holding their breath. Gonzo clocked it right away. Alexis was nervous, and honestly, who wouldn't be? Tia stepped in, saying it'd be fine, and deep down, Alexis was already sure of it. He could do this. Then the sword ripped into motion. Ed burst out in shocked awe. Tia screamed, "You're doing it!" while Gonzo yelled at him not to stop, and Alexis snapped back, annoyed that this was meant to be a legendary moment, not some circus. Then boom, a voice thundered, "Who dared to touch the sacred sword?" That single question flipped everything. 1 second the world was there, and the next, Alexis was all alone. He landed in a lavish hall that looked like a royal castle, and he stared around, completely blown away. A voice rang out and called his name, and then a gentle, familiar girl's laughter teased, "One day, you'll love hearing it." She was so sure the whole planet would one day shout the name Alexis. After all, he was her dearest child, and in the vision, Alexis finally saw his mother. In real life, 3 friends stood there watching Alexis freeze in place, and Ed blurted out, "What's wrong with you?" while Tia's worry shot up fast, and she hurried over. Out of nowhere, a massive golem's fist came crashing down right in front of her. Gonzo blurted, yelling if Ed was even okay, then fresh golems surged nearby. "Is this a trap?" Ed couldn't tell. The moment panic hit, everyone scattered. He shouted at Alexis, trying to snap him out of that trance, but Tia wasted no time. This was strong magic. Ed's mind wasn't here. His consciousness had been ripped into another reality. These giants stand guard over the trial, and they refuse to let a single soul mess with the hero's ritual. In Alexis's memories back when he was a kid, he begged his mom for one more story, and she just laughed because he was obsessed with legends about heroes. The little boy vowed that he'd grow up into a hero too. Then the day shattered everything when his mother died. Ever since then, Alexis has been grinding nonstop. Every single day, she chased her faith, forged herself into the hero he inspired, and chased that one burning goal, to be special. Then, out of nowhere, he finally crossed paths with that man, and it hit him harder than ever. He wasn't special at all. He's just a normal guy until the chaos starts. In reality, Gonzo swung and smashed the golem, but it refused to budge, swallowing the hit like nothing, and that enemy turned out to be shockingly tough. Tia realized brute strength wouldn't save them. She had to hit the magic that kept him alive, and this job landed on Ed while he and Gonzo took Alexis. Tia lunged at the golem and swore it would never get to call the shots. Then the battle surged on. Gonzo leaned in and barked, "Alexis, wake up." In his mind, it was always the same rematch against that man who once ripped open his weakness, but Alexis wouldn't back down. Maybe it was pure stubborn pride. He just had to prove to his mom she was wrong, and once he locked in that goal, he wouldn't stop. And just like that, the day exploded. Everyone in the world finally heard it. A brand new hero had been picked, stamped by divine will, and the crowd roared his name at the top of their lungs, Alexis. And after years of grinding struggle, he finally stopped and thought, "Wait, is this really what I wanted?" He remembered how he thanked Tia for her strength and begged her to come with him. She agreed just to back the title. Then she revealed her name again, Lunarisha, but not everyone could match his speed. He once told Tia her way of dodging Ed was way too complicated. So she snapped back that it was the only trick she had left to keep him away, because the second he joined them, she wouldn't be able to protect him anymore. She knew the truth. Ed would despise her for this, but he had to live, and he had to see the world without war, no matter what it cost. Alexis told her she'd done the right thing, because if Ed didn't get out alive, he'd only get a pointless death that changed nothing. But what did Ed see? Nothing like this has ever happened before. Then the voice snapped back. "It's no trick, no illusion. It's a memory of a possible future that's been gone for ages." These weren't just dreams, they were real memories, buried so deep Alexis could barely breathe through them. He saw Tia and Gonzo. Were they fighting out there right now? And then a voice cut in. Even if his people adored him, the hero's promises still hadn't been kept. At the end, everything crumbled, no strength left at all. Alexis fought and fought, but his hand wouldn't even lift the sword. Then a voice cut through the silence, demanding, "Are you even worthy of being called a hero?" Alexis started spiraling like, do I really have what it takes, or am I just pretending I deserve this title? The hero has to pour out his everything to save the world. But his stubborn pride won't let him sacrifice, and that single refusal turns his stand into a road straight to defeat. And finally, everything shatters as the hero's illusion crumbles, and humanity meets its end. Alexis swallowed the truth and nodded. He finally got it. Ed and Tia were duking it out right nearby, and that same voice clawed through his head again. "Are you really a hero?" Alexis answered with a shaky voice. He had no clue. Just because he's named that doesn't mean it's true. Maybe he was just acting the part everyone wanted to believe, but deep down, he was never a real hero at all. Ed's eyes went wide. He couldn't believe what he just heard. Then Alexis barreled right on. Who gets to decide if someone's born great or if they have to grind their way there? He's made from the people who believed in him, so when the world tries to pin him to a so-called truth, he'll carve his own path anyway, even if it means shattering that belief. Because he's the hero, and the space around him erupted in a blinding burst of light. A massive blast of energy slammed into everything around them, like the world just got hit by a thunderstorm. Ed, Tia, and Gonzo leaned in with wide eyes as Alexis traced the sacred sword into existence, and it flashed like a piece of the moon, pure beauty with deadly bite. But the real power wasn't just the blade, it was the bond between them, the teamwork that drove him forward. He stood with them, fully convinced they'd carve a path to victory and end the Lord of Demons. And right then, Alexis finally became a real hero. Moonlight shimmered across his eyes like a warning light. On the night before the decisive battle, Gonzo took the night watch, told Alexis to sleep, and pressed him for news about Tia and Sane. Gonzo told them they'd already dropped off to sleep. Fatigue finally caught up with them, and Alexis shot him a serious, heartfelt thank you for all his support. Gonzo, stunned by the way Alexis spoke, blurted out, "Are you scared I won't make it to tomorrow?" Alexis snapped back, "No, I just want us ready," then drove the point home. "Gonzo, you have to live for yourself." Gonzo shot back that he'd been bracing for this for ages, and Alexis fired back with a sharp truth. Most people can't get ready the way he does. Gonzo nodded and said, "You can't force the same grit out of everyone." Then he clenched his fist and swore, "But when the time hits, I'll throw everything I've got to shield the hero." Alexis looked him in the eye and said, "If one day everything falls apart, just forgive my selfish heart and still smile." In this brutal fight, Alexis snapped a signal to Gonzo. He got it instantly and fired up his aura shield with total confidence. His fists flared to life as he shouted to Ed, "Tell me, did you spot the target?" Ed shot back, "Not yet, too many enemies are swarming us." Then Alexis snapped, "Retreat." He gritted his teeth and vowed to take the target out himself and unleashed his secret technique. Full Moon Slash, a technique that drinks in the moon sword's full power, and then boom, one blinding explosion crashes across the battlefield. Ed burst ahead through smoke and roaring flames. This was what a real hero looks like. Then he checked the compass, fixed his aim on the target, and shot the signal to Tia. She answered instantly, ready. The enemy S tucked away at the very top of the tallest tree, ready to strike. At that exact moment, Alexis unleashed a brand new technique, Ray of the Storm, and the sacred sword's true power surged through it. As the battles raged on, Ed snapped his focus back and whispered, "This is the forest between the human and demon worlds, the one they only speak about in legends. Forbidden, monster-filled. 10 years ago, he and Tia slipped through it using forbidden skills like a one-time miracle. But now, without the power of a hero, you don't survive." Later, the crew pulled over for a quick breather, and one of them said, "We've made it this far, so we'll be okay." The others nodded right along. Tia let out a tired sigh because they'd been living on nothing but canned food for ages. She craved Ed's real, home-cooked meals, and when Ed caught her look, he grinned. "When we get back to the city, I'll cook something so delicious you'll forget all about this." Gonzo threw himself into the conversation. Food is already his main fuel, but out here in the forest, trying to cook is a whole different beast. Tia said she'd wait, yet she spun back to Alexis fast, her voice trembling. "After all that intense gear, is everything really okay?" Alexis said he was doing fine, but admitted the equipment still wrecked him sometimes. Yet he'd learn, because of course he's a hero, and Ed nodded like, "Yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing we should expect from him." Tia used to think fighting the demon world would take years, until just 6 months after meeting Ed, and somehow it already felt like an eternity, which Gonzo also agreed with, while Ed calmly said, 6 months. That long stay in the party was the price to earn a ticket back to the white world, and he'd just paid it. Now it was time for the cast-out. "One day on the road can beat 10 years of peace," Gonzo said, and Tia simply nodded. Ed just thought Alexis with that sword wasn't the same anymore. She'd become the strongest here. Without a doubt, he's become a real hero now, strong as steel and even stronger in spirit. And with Tia and Gonzo at their side, they forged the strongest heroic party. Now tell me, Ed, what about him? Even after fighting side by side, his goal never matched theirs. This wasn't his road. He'd break off and leave them behind, no matter how badly a part of him wanted to stay, because home kept pulling his thoughts back. Even after everything he'd been through, his soul still begged to go back, because with so little left to the finish, he couldn't stop now. Tia and Gonzo were buzzing about how they just crushed the demon, and Ed leaned in asking what everyone would do next. Gonzo hesitated, while Ed insisted they all should chase a dream after the dust settles. Inside his head, he plotted how to nudge everything toward expulsion without anyone realizing it, make them almost beg for it themselves, and Tia fully believed Alexis would become king. Ed cracked a joke, picturing the funniest scene imaginable. Then Alexis shot it down, and boom, everyone erupted in laughter until Alexis turned to Gonzo and reminded him of his promise to swing back for a while to the Eastern Kingdom. Gonzo confirmed it. He can't vanish without a report, but he swore he'll be back. Alexis just nodded, totally calm. Gonzo leaned in and teased him like, "Don't be shy." Then he turned to Tia and grilled her about her plans. Tia answered with dreamy eyes. She wants to roam this reborn world, chase what's still unexplored, and finally find a spot she can call home, a place where everyone can reunite again. To her, it felt like a real dream. Alexis smiled because only Tia could have said something like that. Then he turned to Ed and demanded, "So what do you want?" Ed said he wanted to go back to his native village to grab some souvenirs, not for show. It was a small, cozy little place. But Tia snapped that she was upset and that she wanted to visit there too. He tossed out a vague answer and she snapped, calling him stingy. Then she demanded he give her some asterisk way to reach him, because if he vanished without a word, she vowed she wouldn't forgive him. Gonzo nodded and said, "Sure, the party might crash and burn, but what we've got is real. No one can erase it." Alexis blurted it out to Tia for everyone to hear and then stared at Ed in shock, like, why in the world was he getting so sentimental? He couldn't shake the feeling that Ed had gotten drunk on water because they hadn't even started yet. Then Ed snapped the opposite. Alexis had to beat the demon, no matter what it cost. Right here, Alexis could finally turn his peaceful life dream into something real, and he swore he'd keep every promise. Ed reminded him of that, and Alexis. And then he agreed, real deal, no backing out, because he swore a promise with his whole heart. He will crush the Lord of Demons. And Ed leaned in, whispering straight to his own thoughts. This is only the first goodbye, one of a whole storm of 100, he'll be forced to say. Again, he's not gonna be there for the final, so right now, pour everything into it and leave zero regrets behind. The whole party was out cold, and Ed sat there wide awake, wrestling with his thoughts, desperately trying not to let the last thread slip away. Gonzo burst out of the tent. He said he was taking over the watch, told Ed to get some rest, and when Ed asked about Tia, Gonzo said she was asleep. Then he leaned in and asked if anything had happened, and that's when Ed. Without a sound, he leaned in and made his request, dead serious. Gonzo felt the weight of it and blurts out, "Hey, little." Jed swore to himself, no regrets. If it's bound, it gets broken, every last thread. This is his final mission, right before they throw him into exile. Later, they sprinted side by side. Tia screamed and jabbed forward because she'd spotted him at the edge of the demon world. Alexis nodded, "Yeah, that's it. Time to clear the way." He fired up his full moon cutter, and the sword blazed with moonlit power as it tore straight toward his target. The blast tore through everything, and the whole party went still, staring in raw shock. Ed barely managed a smile as he thought, so this is how it all ends. Deep down, he already knew this was the same disaster that started everything years ago, and that's why the first heroic squad got wiped out to the last man. Before them loomed the Lord of Demons, eyes burning with raw fury. He'd waited forever for this moment, and with zero restraint, he greeted the hero and his companions like it was pure joy. The demon cackled like it was his victory party, thrilled for what came next, those brave souls who dared to trek all this way to meet him. He admitted that only a real hero like Alexis could pull this off. But could he still find the strength to stand firm against the army while he's this drained? Ed cut in mid-conversation, acting like he didn't care, until the demon snapped all its attention straight onto him, and the whole vibe flipped in an instant. The ruler replayed the wild reports from the front. Sion, that high-ranking officer, had been beaten, but not as a hero, as a grim, dark-eyed porter. The demon snapped a finger straight at Ed, then that floating eye zoomed in, flashing the truth. He was the culprit. And just like that, the whole demon plan crumbled into chaos because Ed crashed the war straight off its path. Even though the plan briefly sparked dump him and let the others run, the demon erupted into wild laughter. No takebacks. From that moment on, the tiniest enemy had to be wiped out at once with zero mercy. He swore, right here, right now, he'd erase every hero from the face of the earth, powered by the full, brutal strength of the demonic army. Alexis shrugged it off like it was just another headache, wipe out the army, then keep moving, because to him it was nothing but pompous demon nonsense. But the demon's rage erupted like a furnace, fed by that disrespect. Then he barked the order, every troop attack, and like a nightmare breaking loose, a flood of demons crashed onto the heroes. They were sprinting forward with one brutal goal, murder. Alexis didn't even blink. This horde was just a warm-up for him. It calmly said, "Don't worry, we've got this." this. Tia snapped at Alexis, don't burn yourself out, your real trial is still waiting up ahead. Gonzo backed it up, we've gotta save our strength. Let them handle the first wave. It was a battle cry that ripped through the air. Gonzo tore into the battle, his strength slammed the demons apart. Then Tia snapped into a spell, yanking raw power straight from the earth, and her magic blossomed into a crescent moon that pulverized stone, Lunaris's power unleashed. The spell tore into the world as the melody of the earth. Stone spikes erupted from the earth, shredding the demons as they pierced through. The demon lord finally cracked the truth of his plan. This wasn't about winning right away. It was a war of grind and suffering, slowly crushing the heroes until the final battle came knocking. So he barked the order for his troops to push all the way. One of the demons snapped at Commander Garage's. Those attacks were useless because the heroes held the line, and especially the elven magic was crushingly too strong. Panic detonated in their ranks. Where were they even getting this insane amount of magical power, and why on earth wasn't it draining away? The elf kept hurling spell after spell like her power had no end. So whatever intelligence report they wrote, it never fit the truth. Then Garages unleashed Jormungandr and the ground started shaking, like the world had no choice but to brace for something huge charging in. Cracks snaked across the ground, ripping it apart as everything around me started to crumble under my feet. The earth gave out under them, and the entire party plunged straight into the abyss. The top layer of soil caved in, ripping open a massive chasm. Ed's eyes widened instantly because this wasn't an accident. It was a trap. He clenched his teeth and pushed through the panic. Finding a way out was the only thing that mattered. Then, in the chaos, a shout tore through the noise. The hero has been found. From the pitch-black dark, a demon slithered out, a massive serpent that flashed like steel under every flicker of light. Tia barked an order for everyone to hang on, then started chanting under the name Lunarisha, when a colossal stone fist ripped up from the ground. Ed shot her a quick look, then Tia gave a firm nod and shouted, "It's time to strike." In her grip, the hand yanked every single one of them away from the monster right as it opened its mouth to swallow them whole. Then the monster hurled flames. Tia snapped her hand up and the stone strike smashed the attack aside. The demon snake cackled, mocked them as pathetic, and vowed to chomp straight through the protective barrier itself. Gonzo snapped his brows together. This wasn't just some giant monster. It could asterisk fly, and that blew everything wide open as pure, unexpected chaos. Alexis popped in above him and said, "A flying, stretchy snake, that's such a wild combo," and Ed just nodded like, "Yeah, convenient, right?" Alexis lifted the line, "Even our thoughts are synced." Ed told us to grab the moment and enjoy the ride while it lasts. Then he drove his sword straight into the monster's torso. The colossal serpent lost control, raging so hard it shook the sky. Alexis barked, "Left now up," while Ed snapped back, "No, can't do this," as the whole machine slipped out of their control. The crash was already written in fate, so Ed grabbed Tia and demanded a wind spell for a gentle landing, and she pulled it off just in time. The monster smashed into the earth and the heroes rocketed upward, then dropped hard nearby. Ed checked on Tia and asked, "You good?" Tia flashed a smile, "I barely made it." Ed praised her, then handed over the elixir since she'd burned through way too much mana, and yep, their journey is still a long, brutal road ahead. Tia shot back a thank you and Gonzo erupted in loud laughter. "Those hits don't harm the muscles." Alexis blinked, "Yeah, they finally made it. But the route they took was totally the alternative way." He jabbed forward and shouted, "There it is, the heart of the real demonic realm." Tia clutched her breath and warned, "This way in is deadly." Gonzo muttered, "They're leaving the army behind. If they don't wipe it out, we'll get trapped between two fronts, but going straight at them is way too dangerous." Then Alexis slammed on the brakes, spun to face his companions, and poured out a heartfelt thanks for the journey they'd shared, because up ahead wasn't just danger, it was the death zone. He never talked like some ruler, he talked like a real friend, and now it looks like there's no turning back. They aren't picked the way he was, but they still get a choice. So if someone's ready to retreat, they won't be punished. But tell me, who's got the guts to stand by him all the way to the very end? Ed understood everything, and it wasn't some request for loyalty at all. It was a bold, burning promise that he'd never back down. That's why Alexis had fought so hard to save Tia earlier. He just didn't know how to say what he felt. Tia snapped back right away, "Silly question, yeah, we're going together." And Gonzo swore even if the hero himself stopped, his muscles still wouldn't. Ed burst out laughing, finally breathing easy, because Alexis could pull off a decision like that, right? Everything would be fine until out of nowhere he went dead silent and muttered, "I won't go with you." The whole party went stone quiet because that was not how Ed usually talked. Even Tia, who never rattled, couldn't mask her nerves, and the worst part, not a hint of humor lingered in his voice. He froze in place, eyes locked in with pure seriousness. His voice stayed calm, but the weight in it crushed the air. This was the end of his journey. He promised he'd stick around to the finish, yet one burning question had been simmering in his gut for ages. Should he really throw himself into this fight by his side? If he stays and the Demon Lord wins, he might lose the last shot at getting home. The hero and the Lord are total opposites. When one stands, the other can't exist. If Alexis loses the title of hero, the rules that would kick him out of the party vanish. Then there's no way back. Tampering with the gods' fickle laws is a gamble that can wipe everything out, and right now, he just can't choose. And just when everyone was dreaming of victory, Ed chose exile again, another one-way door where their paths would split for good, until Alexis stepped forward, silently getting it all. He admitted that the only reason he'd made it this far was because Ed could shoulder that kind of weight without breaking, and for Alexis, the chosen hero, it was obvious. If you're standing above ordinary people, death looms over you like a never-ending shadow, and that's why Ed's vulnerability hit so hard. Tia tried to reassure them, but the truth was already screaming plain as day. Ed admitted it himself. His hunger to go back home was the North Star driving him, and when your heart still aches for home, there's only one real answer: leave. Right at that goodbye, Alexis leaned in and told Edu, "Don't fear a thing." Because of him, Edu now had the real holy sword, one that could slice through any defense. Ed didn't even flinch, he accepted it without a fight. He geared up to vanish from the battlefield, teleporting out before the battle went nuclear, and he knew he'd never step back onto that shared road again. Right before Tia vanished, he spun to Gonzo and left one burning question hanging. Could he really survive the loss? And then, like a spark, a memory from that night by the fire came roaring back. Then Ed, cracking a joke, asked why Gonzo suddenly got so serious. Little did Ed know, it was pure hidden anxiety hitting him hard, but right then, Gonzo finally felt a wave of relief. Now it's crystal clear, Alexis isn't just any hero, he's the strongest one this world has ever seen. With Tia, who could mow down any enemy, and Gonzo, the stubborn wall that never fell, together, their party felt unbeatable. Their sheer strength already forced pity on the Demon Lord because his end was basically locked in. Gonzo straight up said it. Without Ed, they wouldn't have even made it halfway. Everyone got it. Ed was the bedrock holding their whole journey up. The discussion basically screamed one terrifying truth. Once the demonic world breaks through, the enemy won't stop. It'll creep in the shadows and wait for you. That wild, chaotic fight was already screaming one thing. Those next attacks were going to hit with terrifying power. Even with tiny moves, you could still manage to push through. But if a real army shows up, it's a whole different beast. Yet Gonzo still stood there, unshaken and confident. He figured these battles might be the perfect opening to wear the enemy down before the final hit. So in that charged moment, Ed finally made his choice and turned for home, not in panic, but because he had to return for something that mattered, and even when their paths split, the bond between them stayed unbroken. Jed knew it from the start. Something was off, so horribly off that they never got a breath. Fights never stopped, sleep was nowhere, peace felt like a joke, and the demonic world ground them down without mercy. Yeah, they racked up wins, but the strain was already crushing them, and you could see it on every single face. They were wiped out. So how do you beat the Demon Lord when every step steals your strength? He stared at Gonzo. He spun to face him like a true friend and like an unshakable shield standing between everyone and danger, because Gonzo's only mission was to get Alexis to that final battle, and every ounce of his strength was built for that one purpose. Ed once said, when the moment hits, make the call with logic, not emotion, and if you have to, then do what's necessary. Gonzo always sweeps in from behind to keep everyone safe, so now Ed steps up and begs to be covered too. Even now, it still wouldn't let go of his mind. Ed believed in Gonzo, and he whipped his head around to him. Then he got the word that the backpack was already stuffed with everything he'd need. Heavy as it is, it's nothing for Gonzo, a total trifle to him, and he just nodded. He took one look and the whole truth slammed into place. No explanations needed. Gonzo's eyes flared with instant understanding. When that last silent nod hit, it was game over. The decision was sealed. Gonzo yanked the backpack onto his shoulder, spun toward Tia and Alexis and shouted, "All right, let's go." Tia slammed on the brakes. Something felt horribly off. They were headed the wrong way while the demon army lurked in the opposite direction. Then Alexis finally clicked. He understood. He spun around, eyes blazing wide. Ed was already sprinting off, charging straight for the demon army. Alexis lunged to chase after him, but Gonzo yanked him back, clamping his grip tight. Alexis tore free and demanded they let him go, but Gonzo didn't budge. No way, the hero's path goes forward, not back. Tia's eyes widened with worry as she asked what was happening, and Alexis snapped in anger, feeling betrayed, insisting, "Don't you dare act like I'm nothing." For him, there wasn't a single shred of logic that could ever explain a friend's sacrifice, no matter what anyone said, and it felt unforgivable. At that exact moment, Tia lunged forward, desperate to wrench fate off its path. A blazing magical circle snapped into existence around them, and Alexis demanded answers on the spot. Tia pressed Gonzo for why he triggered the protective barrier, then the hero barked, "So Ed really thinks I'd swallow this kind of plan?" But Ed's voice boomed from below and it hit everyone hard. They'd been completely wrong about what was really going on. And then the demon himself declared it. He'll unleash his whole army and crush them here, right on the spot. So if Ed knocks out every last one of these forces, then it won't be long. Only the demon lord will still stand. That guy wasn't lying. Everything they'd seen so far proved it, and deep down, it was Ed they wanted most. So tell me, isn't it obvious he's the one who should walk right into their path? Gonzo let out a quiet sigh and said, "Being popular is brutal." Then he locked eyes with Alexis and spoke to him straight. "You're a hero. Do you feel the grit Ed just showed?" Everyone, even Ed, swore Alexis was the one who'd take down the Lord. "So tell me, what is a hero supposed to do right now?" Alexis replayed every moment where he could have stepped up, and then Ed's words hit him again. "I don't want all our efforts to be in vain." Because now he finally understood what that sacrifice truly cost, and he knew he had to end this war. Ed's harsh voice kept pounding in his head, fair but brutal. "Tell me, are you truly a hero if your stubborn pride means more to you than your duty?" Alexis went stone-cold silent, lost in his own thoughts, because this was a promise and he knew it. He swore he'd beat the Lord, no matter what it cost him. This is his mission, his purpose, his job, his destiny. And now it's time to slam down the final line. When Ed snaps and wants to walk out, doesn't that mean he's getting kicked out of the hero squad? Tia blurted it out, tears spilling as she fought to deny it. She refused to believe it, begging Gonzo to stop, then he yanked her up anyway. Tia fought, twisting and struggling to break free, and snapped back to Alexis one last time. And the hero finally snapped back, calm on the surface, but aching in every word. Then he hurled the sacred sword straight at Ed. And with that one move, threw him out of the hero's party for good, like he never belonged there. But he leaned in and said, "You've got to come back and you have to bring this sword in person. Because we're friends." He saw it all coming, then he braced himself and accepted every last bit of it. All the rules for his comeback got satisfied, then he passed over the batch right under Gonzo's watch. 10 minutes remained before he came back. Ed stepped back and guilt hit like a wrecking ball, because this whole thing started as one mission, to bring Tia her smile back. And just like that, he made her cry again. "I still don't get it," he thought, like his brain refused to catch up. Tia was trembling and sobbing, begging Gonzo to let her go because she could feel it. If this kept going, Ed was going to die. Her eyes went huge. This was happening all over again. She's about to sacrifice herself again to save him, because this is the second time her life is on the line. She'll be the only one left standing again, and that tightening in her chest, what in the world is it? She doesn't understand, but it rages, burning and breaking her from the inside. Her scream kept rising, louder and more desperate by the second, and Gonzo grabbed the moment to tell her to stop. If she keeps pushing, she'll just trash Ed's decision. Tia snapped back that she gets it, but then she fought to make it clear, even Gonzo doesn't want this. Then Gonzo blurted it out. Ed was the one who told him to stall everyone, and Ed even put the job in his hands himself. But deep in Gonzo's gut, something still rattled. That weird, haunting feeling like he'd heard those exact words before. The image looked way too real, like it was ripped straight from a dream, one where Alexis was there, too. Ed whispered, all confused, like he'd handed him something important. But what was it? Then he broke into a soft smile. For Ed, it was only a dream. Meanwhile, Gonzo clenched his fists, swallowing his fury, because how could he call himself a friend if he couldn't even react the right way? Tia went completely still, frozen by the silence like it had teeth. Meanwhile, Ed stood alone before the Demon Lord's army, heart steady as he offered a quiet apology for the wait. Then the heroes finally could push forward because Alexis was going to win. A demon cackled, saying he'd take Ed down fast, then raced to catch up with the others, because this road is the demon's turf. Ed cut him off coldly, snapping, "You really think you've got a future?" Then he barked at them to get ready, because the final battle was about to kick off right here, right now. Ed snapped on the blood motor, and right then he roared that the Demon Lord's army was finished for good. The demon leader scoffed at the idea that one lone man could wipe them all out, until Ed's aura snapped into something wild, and suddenly he wasn't just immortal anymore. He was a walking apocalypse. Tia couldn't shake it, Ed's face during that first meeting, the same strange look she'd never forget. And again, when he forged weapons for them, like he could see the whole world through a glass window, where kids were laughing and playing outside. That look didn't belong to this world at all, like he'd been dropped into the wrong reality, always lingering at the edge of everything, never fully part of the scene. Tia craved this change with her whole heart. No matter what it cost her life, she had to make it undeniable. He belongs here. But what if the place Ed craved was way beyond her wildest understanding? And then bam, some demon showed up out of nowhere. The demon hissed, "This is the last wall. Grasher will end the hero himself." But Tia's gut told her this wasn't the real finish, because if it were, Ed wouldn't have run. Alexis said they were in rough shape and victory wouldn't come easy, and then Tia grabbed the moment. "Gonzo, let me go." He hesitated, but she snapped back, "Everything's fine." Grasher then sneered at the hero, calling him a coward, saying he ditched his comrade. Then Tia snapped into action and started the incantation, summoning the spirit of ether, the 4 seasons, and the wind riding over the last fading light. Grasher froze for a beat, stunned. Tia spoke the name **lunaris** like an order, and her will hit the air like thunder. Then she called down a storm with the call of the storm. A silvery spirit sword flared to life, glowing bright. Then a monstrous tornado tore through the streets, smashing and swallowing everything in its path. Tia clutched her resolve in her thoughts and chose to push forward, one step at a time, into the world Ed had always dreamed of. Then she snapped to Alexis, shouting that the moment was here because they were finally racing toward the finale. And deep in her chest, the thought kept roaring, "Is this enough?" While Ed stood there completely alone, facing the entire army of demons. One of them screamed, "The barrier's been shattered." But that was already game over as Ed slammed through the enemies on both sides with zero mercy. One demon stared in pure horror. Grasher was dead. So who was this man standing alone? And trust me, he was no hero. How does a simple porter carry himself with that kind of strength? On the front line, Ed slammed the blood motor on again. Bam, his strength shot up 100 times, energy roaring through his veins until the blood literally started to steam, but the brutal catch hit right after. He'd be dead in 10 minutes. The demon wanted to rip Ed's rhythm apart, so it snapped out the spell, disappearance of gravity. The leg of the food tore free from the ground, and shock flared in his eyes. His body started lifting off the ground until he realized the spell wasn't targeting him at all. It was rewriting the world around him. Ed's stomach dropped. This wasn't a minor setback, it was a disaster. And the demon was already smug, convinced victory sat in his palm. He launched his last assault, Star of Destruction. A brutal explosion tore through the spot where Ed had just been standing. So sure he'd won, the demon decided Ed was already dead, then smirked at the thought. Tough in spirit, but ultimately nothing. But another demon snapped that he should fall back and zero in on the hero, so the army could regroup under Yejnan's command, while Higanen was told to stall the enemy. He ignored the order anyway, and that loss forced him to do everything with pride. Higanen decided to take the hero down himself, and his companion erupted in rage because the Demon Lord's order was crystal clear. The hero came first. But just as he started to finish his sentence, his body got obliterated in an instant, and the neck was the first thing to tear free. Ed stepped into the light, alive and breathing, right where they'd watched him die, and now the fate they feared stood there in front of them. Every demon shuddered as the body collapsed into dust, and not a single explanation held up. The demon unleashed gravitational press and slammed him down until he couldn't breathe. But Ed slammed magical absorption and shattered the spell like it was nothing. His whole body blazed with the spell invulnerability, wrapped in living armor. He shot a glare at the enemy, weak, untrained, clueless, and without a second thought, he snapped into action and triggered the Bloodclaw tempering. The blade flashed brighter than ever, then it hit him like a punch. The clock in this world was running out, and those 100 years of the same loop played on with new faces, but always the same stranger. Ed summoned the orbital reflector and unleashed a magic that rang true to his very soul. She became the living proof of the freedom he fought to claim. He chose his road, no one else could shape his future because he forged it himself. Then the desperate demon screamed for help, and he finally understood the horrifying truth. This man was the worst enemy imaginable. Unstoppable and alone, Ed surged forward like nothing could stop him. I flipped bloodline temperature back on finally. In his heart, regret had zero chance to survive. No evil left, no tragedy lingering, just him standing tall under the rainbow rain as the battlefield erupted. He stood amid the wreckage of fallen demons, while the sky itself sobbed over the dead quiet victory. Demons stared in pure horror. Who the heck is this Ed, the one who tore through everything by himself? Ed fired up regeneration. It was like healing magic with no bandages, no warnings, just raw power. His severed hands knit themselves back together, bit by bit, muscle returning, skin sealing, until his whole body was whole again, and only then did he let out a soft breath, because the end was closing in. The demon leader hauled in the broken remnants of his troops, death already circling still. He wouldn't quit. Kill Ed, now. He lunged forward, then Ed snapped out of the way, whipped his left hand into a blade, and buried the enemy with a brutal strike to the skull. A fresh demon lunged in from the flank, and Ed shot forward, yanking the horn off the one he just killed, and slammed it into the fight like a club, smashing the second one hard. In the blink of an eye, he was already swinging a brand new sword, one clean slash, and the enemy dropped like a stone. Finally, Ed reached for the sacred sword, his hands cradled a holy instrument like it was destiny itself. He swung his attention to the last enemy, the general, sizing him up and admitting, to his credit, just how lethal he was, because in this whole lineup, it was Ed who stood out as the most dangerous. The general already knew Ed would never come back, so if he was going to die, it'd be right there with him, and that meant the end was going to slam shut here. No doubt when the general triggered the final form, a colossal eye ripped open and floated in the sky, pulsing like it wanted to swallow the world. The spell hit next, gravitational collapse, a power that doesn't just destroy, it erases everything. And while that catastrophe unfolded, Ed wasn't locked onto the fight at all. His mind stayed on the people he was fighting to protect. The general swore Ed was the strongest, big mistake, because the real shield was gone, so he slammed into battle first and he didn't drop until the very end. His body, spirit, and strength crushed everyone in the room. There was nobody who could even come close. Alexis, fearless and unshakable, charged straight into the demon to end it, while Tia's gentle smile kept hope alive, even when the darkness tried to swallow everything. That's real strength, whole, genuine. Jed was different, like a shadow slipping through the heroes, a stranger who never truly fit anywhere. And that's why he could hand over everything, igniting every last spark of himself, even if he vanishes right here, he's certain of one thing, because they're still going to win. At that exact moment, Ed drove the blade into the general like it owed him answers, laughing as he shouted that the goal was finally his, because power never comes free, not even for him. Ed would burn, and he'd never get to see his comrades again. Lonely, dead, and still the strongest loser. The general spat it out as his final insult burned in the air. Ed didn't even bother answering, he just cleaved the enemy straight in two, and the monster collapsed for good. His remains lay where they dropped, and Ed stood over them, staring like the world had just gone silent. Then boom, he erupted into loud, wild laughter, shaking all over as his body buckled under the overload. Even with regeneration, the wounds were still brutal, and that was the end. So yeah, he made it, no sweat on his brow, just pure hell chasing him down, and he bulldozed a path through it all. Then he pressed a hand to his heart. He begged him to hang on just a little longer, and he threw everything he had into it. From this point on, it wasn't luck anymore, it was their path, and he was sure of one thing. Alexis was going to smash the Lord. So then, what happens to all of them next? What's coming right after this? A quiet smile tugged at her lips, and that ruined world was finally gone. Old Alexis was done, and she'd have a brand new life. As for Tia, she wouldn't have to hide anymore. Everyone will get to live there, just like Ed already knows that world. It's a little different, but it still feels way too familiar, fate, or just dumb luck. Either way, it hits the same. Right here, right now, it all clicked. This is the final stop, and he knows it. His thoughts snapped to Tia, right back to those last moments before the second round, and then it hit him. This was the final stretch of the road he'd chosen. Did he actually keep his promise? Did he push it all the way to the very end? Because the quiet says everything, nothing more to add. He fought with everything he had, and yeah, that had to be enough. But still, Tia and the others might be searching for him. With only seconds left before the return, hope was hanging by a thread. Because if nothing showed up, it'd be devastating to face the void where everything had vanished. That's why he dropped the sword, just one simple move, but it said everything. They'll finally get it, and then he died here. His body turned heavy, like the world was weighing him down, and he pushed right up to the edge, yet somehow it felt right, because it's over now. Everything's finished. With his final breath, he poured out a wish for success to Alexis. then handed everything over to him and to Gonzo. And just like that, his mission is done. The shift kicked off like a spark and snapped shut just as fast. Then those eyes burst open. Ahead of him stretches a blank white plain with no color at all, same as always. His armor looks beat to hell, his body screams exhaustion, and that same worthless sword still sits in his grip like it did from the very start. Everything's exactly the same, and honestly, thank goodness. If even one thing shifted, he might have never survived the fallout of exile. He gave a quiet chuckle, like even the doors remembered him, the exact same ones. Meanwhile, his friends are stronger than ever, charging toward victory. No buns from Mon, though. What a shame, maybe next time. Because hey, the best part, everything still lies ahead. Ed surged a step ahead, and just like always, that copper glow flared bright, welcoming him back without a single wobble, steady and calm as ever. He was sure he'd get nothing again, but right after the first round, the game rewarded him a second time, like it had something bigger waiting. Maybe a brand new skill or an upgrade to the one he already had. He pressed his fingers to the crystal ball, and for a second, the universe just went dead silent. Right then, a book slammed down on his head, and he groaned, barely holding back his irritation like it was the usual curse over and over. Why does it always hit the head? But wait, this time feels totally different. The book wasn't white at all. Its cover was stamped with the title, Journal of Heroic Outcome. And tell me, was this really the reward waiting for the second round? He tore it open, and there it was, an autobiography, not his but Alexis's, laid out from the very start down to that ridiculous diaper story, spelled out with terrifying precision. Even his growth, his habits, everything, right down to that reckless kid stuff ended up catching him anyway, and Ed couldn't just ignore it. It felt painfully familiar, like it had happened to him before. Rage always simmered in that old man's eyes. Then Tia shows up, and Ed's fingers just hover over these pages, and now he's alone. Reading about himself through someone else's eyes felt downright weird, yet wildly intriguing, because the world he thought he knew was suddenly playing out from a whole new angle. It hooked him from the first second until it hit him like a slap. He wasn't in the story anymore. He wasn't the main character, he was just some outsider. So then tell me, who was he really? Then boom, a page hits so hard it steals my breath. The fourth member of the squad. Without him, the heroes never reached the Lord of Demons. He wasn't some random traveler, he was the turning point for everything, and in the book they call him a true hero. He just smiled and shook his head way too loudly, and still, a wave of relief crashed over him. Alexis really did win. He shut his eyes and felt it down to his bones. He spotted the brand new shelf, and before he could even think, he slammed a book onto it. It clicked into place like the shelf was built just for it, empty for now, but he refused to stop there. He needed answers, wanted to track down what happened to the others. Still, no matter how hard he searched, the tale of the heroes ended with one thing, their victory. Gonzo is probably back home by now, steady as a rock, but he can't shake the fear about Tia. What if she's out there wandering, or worse, hunting for him? The idea hits like a punch to the gut, and yeah, it could be exactly the truth. They kept their word, now it's his turn. 99 more worlds lie ahead, and this time, everyone's getting their happy ending. Suddenly, bam, a memory hits. The demon general warned that Ed would die alone. Why is it crashing down on him right now? He'd always known it. It was his call, one route where he'd vanish without a single trace. He belonged to no one, just a shadow slipping through the dark, but he chose that loneliness on purpose, chasing the one thing he believed he could find. A home where he'd finally be happy. Ed stepped up to door 2, then he froze, sensing someone closing in behind him. He spun around, and there she was, Tia. She finally found him. She finally showed up for real. While the hero's tale snowballed into pure legend, kids reenacted it everywhere, and one proud kid even bragged that beating the Lord was basically a piece of cake. They snatched up roles on the spot, hero, Tia, Gonzo, then one boy groaned, "Of course it's Ed again." And another demanded, "Why is it always someone else gets to be the hero?" Right then, adult Tia glided past, elegant, stunning, effortless. Then she stepped up, answered the complaint with a warm smile, and reminded them that Alexis himself had already named Edda his best friend. And she went on and on about how insanely cool he was, right as the kids all went rigid. Someone gasped, "Wait, is that an elf?" Another voice followed, "No way, she's beautiful." 10 long years had slipped since the victory, and the world was finally easing back into peace. For Tia, the safest, calmest place in all of it was the kingdom of Notland. Deep in the royal palace, the whole place was buzzing with state affairs. Then the throne rang out with another address, and the king snapped that they'd carry it out, no delay. The advisor said, "This is it, one final request before we're done. and the king nodded, then leaned in and demanded, "So, who's the visitor?" An elven guest burst into the hall, dropped into a bow, and thanked everyone for the honor of a one-on-one audience. The king snapped the formalities shut and said, loud and clear, that royal time was too precious to waste on useless ceremonies. With a sly little smile, she greeted the king by name like they'd known each other forever, Tia. And the moment Alexis saw her in that rose-colored outfit, recognition hit instantly. Their eyes locked, and the next second Tia threw her arms around him like pure happiness. 2 long years had gone by. She teased him about how effortlessly he'd slipped into the king's role, and Alexis, blushing hard, finally begged her to let go. She realized Gonzo wasn't coming with her, and Tia told everyone the truth. Gonzo was stuck studying and wouldn't be ready to hit the road for a while. Alexis nodded and pushed for details, so Tia said she'd sailed in way faster than taking land. Just as they were about to move on, Advisor Reginald rolled up with a grin, praising Tia for still burning just as fiercely and staying as wild and free-spirited as ever. She beamed at him, asked to talk with Alexis right away, and Reginald snapped into an explanation. Yes, the king still had meetings, but everything shifted as soon as they heard she was coming. Alexis swallowed his fury because he wasn't told a thing, while Tia practically glowed with relief and thanked him. That evening, they stood shoulder to shoulder, staring down at the night city like it was alive, those lights flickering below like a river of stars. Then Alexis shoved a drink into Tia's hands, and the chill of the night air hit them both. She thanked him for the warmth, then spun her gaze across the city. Progress was everywhere. Alexis took the compliment, but she just shrugged and said, "We've still got a long way to go." Still, this right here was the first real step. Out past the capital, everything stayed swallowed in darkness, yet that mission vowed to light up every single home, because if it failed, Edu's promise would turn into nothing. Tia couldn't forget that day. After crushing the demon lord, they sprinted on pure fumes straight to the last place they'd seen Ed. But when they finally arrived, all they found was the mangled remains of monsters, and the abandoned sword of Ed lying there, silent. She just wanted to bring his body back home, at least that hope. Years of searching crushed her until a spark finally flickered. Maybe Ed was still alive and 10 long years had already slipped away. Someone said maybe it's time to swallow the truth, because the world's already moving without us. But Tia didn't aim for fame. She set her sights on the eastern continent, chasing the soul detection technique with burning curiosity, and it paid off more than she ever expected. Even with the panic and trouble it unleashed on Gonzo, she pushed through and somehow succeeded, finding the exact spot where Ed's soul was trapped. It was wild, there was nothing, and suddenly he was here, alive, but her happiness snapped into agony because she couldn't reach him. The source was so far off it felt like it lived past the sea, past the sky, maybe even beyond the edge of the world itself. Tia refused to quit, her mind racing as she searched for a spell strong enough to smash any distance. Teleportation, except pulling it off, takes a mountain of mana, enough to make your veins burn. Even an elf with a monster stash of stamina couldn't pull off enough to survive that. Her only shot was to scrape mana from the entire kingdom, or maybe the whole world, pulling in volunteers with her name and purpose lighting a fire in them, but the real nightmare sat at the destination. Teleporting at random could mean dying on the spot. Tia had to get everything ready, but she didn't budge. She held her ground, thanked Alexis for the support, and kept moving forward. But she finally chose to stop dragging everyone into it because she knew Ed would lose his temper if her mistakes started hurting others too. Alexis was panicking, but she pulled him back down and calmed him. She once saved the world, so yeah, she's definitely taking charge of this too. That very night, a sudden knock slammed into Alexis's office door. It was Reginald. He snapped his fingers like, "All right, time to rest. We're done for the day." Alexis agreed right after he wrapped up his business. Reginald then pitched dinner with Tia, maybe even planned a whole meal, but Alexis waved it off and declined. Now she didn't need to keep guessing. She snagged the thread that led straight to Ed, and suddenly Ed knew he wouldn't get in her way. When they asked Alexis where she was now, she shot back, "In the archives," and he handed her full access on the spot, "So you already know she's buried in research by now." Reginald couldn't shake the dread. He knew exactly how heavy those memories were, and he feared they'd pushed past the breaking point. But Alexis stayed cool and said, "Finally, we've got the missing friend by the tail." They finally hit a real lead, and this time they're not letting go. Ed can't run anymore. Meanwhile, inside the royal archives, Tia stood there, totally frozen in awe, surrounded by mountains of knowledge, modern research, one-of-a-kind works, basically the kind of mind-blowing collection you'd only find in the country's main library. The maid delivered the exact thing she asked for and immediately offered to help, and Tia genuinely thanked her, then sheepishly apologized for how many times she'd requested it. The maid just waved it off, saying it wasn't a hassle at all, it was an honor. Because of this, she cracked open almost every archive there was, yes, even the ones everyone swears are forbidden, and buried herself in titles like Asterisk, the theory of double manifestation, Mana Flux in the demonic world, Asterisk, and the influence of muscle tension on magical output. Her research then exploded forward, faster than ever. She realized she'd hit the jackpot with friends this loyal and dependable, so she had to end this for good, even if it meant betting her whole life just to find Ed. Inside the treasury, the thing he left behind was still perfectly preserved, the silver wing, and with one of its fragments, Tia pinpointed where Ed's soul had vanished. One step was all that stood between him and victory, but that final stride stretched into an endless abyss, so close it hurt, yet forever out of reach. She already felt it like she'd see him again any day now, but then reality hit hard because the distance between them was still insanely huge. Why did Ed push that far? Tia leaned over the table, exhausted and aching for him. She was crushed with grief, then her eyes caught a page jutting out from one of her books. She slowly drew it free and dove right into reading. Title: Practical Use of External Mana for Large Spells, and it's written by a totally unknown researcher who clearly knew exactly what he was doing. She refused to quit on the miracle, not for a second. Then the very next morning, Tia crossed paths with a cheerful man, and she answered his kindness with a bright smile. He clocked it. She looked fired up. Something good happened. She just burst into a laugh and sped toward the palace. A guard stepped in to block her, but he warned her that His Majesty was tied up. But Tia had already burst inside, bursting with pure joy, yelling that she'd discovered something unreal, a way to push past even the impossible. But right now, the official meeting was still blasting on in the hall. The men at the meeting froze when an unexpected intruder burst in, and Tia finally clocked her blunder, then sheepishly apologized. In a full-blown panic, she slammed the door shut. Then inside, Alexis nearly burst with laughter while the other officials chattered happily in the background. And Lady Tia, she was still glowing with life, her energy lighting up the whole hall. Someone even threw out the idea that she'd just made a huge discovery. Alexis called for a quick temporary break, and everyone nodded along like it was the most obvious thing in the world. When he stepped out, he spotted Tia slumped against the wall, sulking hard. He eased closer and saw impatience written all over her face. She admitted she'd messed up and asked if they could talk now. Then she shoved the article into his hands, the one that had totally hooked her, and her eyes lit up as she asked, in a whisper, who this mysterious author really was. Alexis snatched the document and saw the author was a woman. Her work was seriously impressive. Tia begged to keep it for herself, then straight up asked why he was wearing armor. Alexis told her he had an inspection waiting in a lethal zone, but he'd face it head-on, no matter what. Then he said the article copy was still sitting in the archives. Finally, he leaned in and asked what bombshell she'd uncovered. Tia's eyes lit up. If this theory could work, then the method she once shut down. It might become real again, but she's not spilling every detail yet, at least not until the experiment proves it works. Alexis couldn't stop waiting, and Tia shot back with total confidence. Everything's gonna be fine, piece of cake. Power surged through her and she grabbed Alexis's attention, then declared, loud and unshakable, it was time to act. With a warm wish for his next big win, she spun away in a hurry. Alexis just grinned because that rush of hers was instantly familiar. Up on the tower's peak, Tia rushed to the old mage and fired off an urgent request that couldn't wait. She snapped with an idea that had to be proven, then uncovered a secret bypass. The theory still wasn't proven, but if everything hit right, it could tear right through the world and reach Ed, where he is right now. To make that happen, they'd need a spot with an insane amount of mana, and the only place that fit was the demonic world. She didn't hesitate, she was sure it would work. Alexis and Gonzo ripped apart into their own paths, chasing the duties fate had already stamped on their backs. That's why Tia couldn't ask for anything more from them. This road is hers alone, and she has to walk it by herself. She replayed Ed's words over and over. He'd never want to waste what her friends fought for. For 10 straight years, she'd thrown every method she could at the problem. Even now, she couldn't swear the next try would work. But quitting? No way. Ed's spirit burned in her heart, driving her forward. And that's why she'll find him, whatever it takes. Right in her way sits a quiet lake, and she halts at the shore. She cradled a tiny object in her hands as weird bubbles drifted across the water, and she scribbled furiously, formulas, calculations, and maybe even a secret message. Right nearby, her winged beast swooped down and folded its wings, but she kept right on working. The rain kicked off with a whisper, then slammed down harder, and still Tia barreled forward, soaked to the bone but refusing to turn back. Memories burned in her mind, loyalty steered her feet, and one stubborn hope kept yelling at her to reach him again. Right as she kept moving, a bear crashed into her path. Without a single second of doubt, she clenched her fists and barreled straight toward him. After that brutal crash, she pushed through and came out victorious, pure grit, raw determination, and no backing down. Later, Tia finally collapsed into rest. Then at morning's first light, she sprang back up and headed to the lake again. She scooped up a tiny object from the water and set it down on the ground with steady, careful hands. The sky started to glow and gentle light spilled onto a tiny plant standing alone in the middle of the lake, like a quiet, stubborn proof of all its hard work. Meanwhile, in a whole other region, snow blanketed the ground like a cold curse. White flakes drifted over the rooftops and streets, and everyone kept rushing through the cold, huddled in thick coats like the winter was out for revenge. On the crowded docks by that huge ship, Gonzo stood there, staring into the chaos. 4 years had slipped by since he'd last seen Alexis, and now Alexis gripped his words tight and thanked Gonzo for the journey. Gonzo only shrugged because cleansing the land was his duty, and he didn't show up alone. An elite squad of battle monks from the eastern continent marched with him. Alexis thanked him again, promising that once Gonzo cleared the miasmas, they could finally build teleportation gates for the first time. This is straight up a miracle of magical engineering. Gonzo even admitted he can't believe something like this could exist in their time. Alexis paid tribute to Tia because she was the one who dug up the old records, revived the lost theory, and built the very foundations for the whole project. Gonzo couldn't stand the suspense and blurted out, "So where's Tia right now?" She was supposed to show up 3 months ago. Alexis swore it finally happened. Then she vanished almost instantly. Now she was chasing a fresh lead on Ed, and before she took off, she rushed over to Gonzo. He confirmed it with a nod. Yes, she really did come. But all he gave her was a tight goodbye and a handful of hard-earned advice. Alexis let out a heavy sigh, wishing she'd lean on them more, share the load. Sure, everyone had their own mess to deal with, but one thing burned steady: the urge to find Ed. She never should have gone up against that bear alone, but that's Tia's whole thing. She bulldozes straight ahead, doing everything by herself. But Gonzo shot that down. He refused to believe Alexis's claim that Tia was isolating herself. To him, she was just doing her part of the fate. And that's exactly why Alexis and Gonzo planted their feet and stood their ground together. She could finally head to Ed whenever she wanted, and not every kind of support demands someone be there in person. Even as a king, Alexis admitted he still didn't get most things. That's life. Gonzo laughed, then he leaned in and demanded, "So where's Tia right now in the lab?" Buried in the formula, Alexis slammed his head shake and said no way. Right the second she showed up, she bolted off with a whole new thesis and Gonzo clocked it instantly. She was running on pure urgency. Alexis shrugged like it was nothing because that's just who she is. Try stopping her once a fresh idea hits her brain. Impossible. Gonzo smiled. After all these years, she hadn't changed one bit, but Alexis should have seen where she was heading. Isn't that the truth? Just as he started spilling the theory's content, a woman with a sly smile slid right up to them and teased, "Are you talking about me?" It was Rog, the author of the thesis that had shoved Tia onto a whole new road. Alexis greeted her and answered, yep, they were discussing her work. He even offered to tackle a few questions, and Gonzo chimed in too, because it had been way too long since they'd seen each other. She looked amazing, and Rog's grin lit up right back. She was thrilled to see them too. Alexis fired off a question. Did she know how Tia landed the thesis and what she was hunting exactly? Rog just smirked and said she'd spill it, only if Alexis doubled her research budget. Alexis brushed it off and demanded the truth, no deals. Rog snapped back that Alexis had some nerve. If she wanted answers, she had to respect the work. Alexis fired the duty card. Reporting was her job. Rog countered that more money meant an official request. Pride took over, voices rose, and the whole argument spiraled until Gonzo stepped in and forced them to cool down. He cut straight to the heart of the thesis, and Alexis, though she wavered a little, swore they'd look into her request, meaning it was her turn to spill everything. Rog nodded along, but she raised the real question first. Tell me, has anyone here actually read this work? Gonzo blurted, no, this is too messy for me, and then he snapped into explaining from the very start. The whole theory boils down to one thing: external mana. In plain terms, it let you siphon magical energy straight out of the air around you, like you were drawing from your own inner reservoir. For the longest time, everyone swore this was impossible. Big spells needed a whole squad of top-tier wizards moving in perfect sync. But her method, it pulled off the same impossible feat solo. The whole deal hinges on forging and activating a special magical circle. Once it's ready, anyone who knows the technique can fire it up. And that's exactly how the first teleportation gates came to life. And that took mana, huge amounts of it, and the kind that could stand up to pressure without cracking, thanks to an outside source making it possible in the first place. It was a discovery that could shove magical science forward by centuries, and Gonzo went quiet for a second, stunned by how massive it really was. He spun toward Alexis, demanding his take, because even knowing the theory, this new idea hit like a weight on his chest. Still, one question wouldn't let go. Where is Tia right now? Gonzo then pressed Rog. Does outside mana work differently depending on the terrain? Rog shot back. Of course, more ambient mana means a stronger result, and Gonzo demanded proof, staring her down until she blushed and admitted, yeah, there's a place like that. She cut it out of her thesis on purpose because the mana there is too dangerous, but she couldn't deny the truth. For pure efficiency, it's perfect because monsters live there. Gonzo and I locked eyes, then the demonic world slammed into place. Rog bolted after Alexis, desperate to figure out what possessed him. He slammed his fist down and declared, "The cleansing is postponed." Rog froze. How could he just toss it all aside like that? But Alexis didn't even look back. He had an urgent situation. Tia was seconds from a breakthrough, and Rog couldn't wrap his head around it. Gonzo couldn't believe it and blurted, "So he's really leaving right now?" Alexis nodded, "Yep." And the moment Gonzo processed what he just heard, it clicked. Everything was already set for Tia's teleport, so if they hesitated for even a second, they'd lose her trail for good. Gonzo swallowed hard and agreed, because Tia always moved faster than everyone else. Gonzo added that after the demon lord fell, his power was crumbling, and Alexis nodded along, sure as day that Tia would make it through. In the demonic world, and that's what made it deadly. If they didn't race right now, she'd vanish from sight. Rog barreled in to stop them, but she couldn't wrap her head around his logic. She straight up blurted, "Are you seriously about to step into the world of demons?" Alexis answered with a straight up yes, so confident he even promised he'd step aside if it came to that, but he refused to back down. Rog pressed for real, clear explanations, not rehearsed lines. And just then, a new voice cut in, Reginald. Rog snapped his head toward him, let him make the king answer on this, and the moment the words hit, Rog instantly got the whole situation. "And that's when it hit me, Tia already nailed the teleportation method, didn't she?" Rog snapped, nervous and visibly annoyed. "And what do you think that means? They're about to blow up the whole operation, hundreds of people, one sudden cancellation, and it's disaster. Not just for Alexis's kingdom either, but for the entire eastern continent. And once you start flying to the demonic world on a griffin, you're talking 6 brutal days. So does Alexis really believe Tia will just sit around and wait?" "This is insane," Reginald snapped toward Alexis, asking if there's any asterisk reason that could possibly excuse such a reckless move. "Is there anything more important?" Alexis didn't hesitate. He said this time he's going to personally see his friend off to catch one last glimpse of her, and that's it. No more, no less. Rog froze in shock, because that didn't sound like the words of a king. It sounded like pure emotion exploding out of someone's chest. But Gonzo didn't back down. He swore Alexis had earned it. Rog blinked, confused. "Earned what exactly?" Gonzo answered in one breath, "A reward for saving the world. And for making the right choice right now, sending his companion down the very road she'd walked before. That's what a real hero wishes for, so why couldn't Rog grant him just one day like this? And yeah, he's going to, because he's earned a reward as well. Rog's run out and Gonzo too. They're just gambling with fate, but Reginald already clocked it and backed the plan. He told Alexis, "Go safe, not like royalty, like a true hero heading into the fight." Rog kept grumbling but eventually gave up. "Fine, let it be your way." Alexis shot off a quick apology and Reginald flashed a wink like, "Don't worry, I've got her." With a soft smile he promised, "I'll wait for your return, my prince." Alexis froze in shock, then genuinely thanked him. He headed back to Gonzo, time to hit the road. He gave a nod like, "Yep, I'm in," and Rog muttered under her breath, "That's why I can't stand men. Old or young, they act like they're still kids with grand dreams." Reginald chuckled right along, but deep in his chest, he couldn't deny it. This was amazing. The hero who always fought for humanity finally turned the spotlight onto himself for a friend. That thought lit him up with pure joy, and in silence he wished his prince fly free. Alexis climbed onto the griffin and settled in like she owned the sky. The wind drove them onward, but their minds kept snapping back to Tia, Gonzo, and Ed, because those three are irreplaceable. He knew it, maybe their roads would never meet again, no matter how cozy the shared fire felt, because the ending was already creeping in. The flame will die out, everyone will snap awake, and life will roll forward, so that's why he had to stay right there with her, right now, because he needed one last look. So they wouldn't regret it later. Then, mid-flight, Gonzo jabbed a finger forward. Alexis squinted and suddenly froze. What is that? Right up ahead, they spotted a weird force in the air, but the whole landscape felt wrong, like something was watching. Gonzo pointed out that those giant trees in the middle of the wild forest didn't belong here at all. They looked wrong, planted on purpose, and the only person who could have done it was Tia. Alexis couldn't figure out why they needed those trees at all. Then Gonzo jabbed forward and said it like it mattered. Smoke was already billowing behind them. They tore down to the ground. Alexis leapt off the griffin, bolted into the streets, and shouted for Tia. She had to be close by. Inside Tia's hut, the moment she heard that familiar voice, she jerked in place. Then she peeked out and yep, it was Alexis. Tia promised she'd step out in a bit, and while she steadied the flustered griffin, coolly, she murmured, "Don't worry, your friends are here." She flung the door open and there stood Alexis and Gonzo. Tia waved them in and Gonzo just nodded once, then slipped inside in silence. She told them, "Make yourselves at home," and yup, it was a tiny cabin, but it felt warm and lived in. Alexis shot back, "You built this," and Tia grinned and said, "Me and a little magic help." But then Alexis froze. Why were they here this early? Tia's letter wasn't meant to arrive yet. Gonzo blinked hard. Wait, what letter? A heavy silence slammed into the room and everyone blinked at each other, totally lost. Tia finally snapped in shock. If there's no letter, then why are we even here? That night, she threw herself into the puzzle of it all. Then Gonzo swooped in to help install the teleportation gates, and somehow everything clicked perfectly. Her theory really worked. She was so sure she'd win, she even checked it herself. Alexis only sighed because he knew she'd test everything first. Gonzo couldn't forget those weird trees they'd spotted from the sky. So that's it, part of the plan? Tia's eyes sparkled. Exactly. It wasn't easy, but every step was landing just right. Those trees weren't just ordinary, they were a rare kind built to drink in mana from the air and stash it away, and she even turned them into a hut so she could handle everything on her own. Gonzo snapped to it. These trees were nodes in some massive magical network. Tia nodded and grinned. With their roots acting as the key, she drew a huge magical circle that lit the whole area up. The moment it kicks in, all that stored mana slams together into one power surge, cracking open access to Ed no matter where he's hiding. All the prep was done, so she sent the letter, choosing a human goodbye. Alexis dropped his gaze and Gonzo watched her with silent awe at how hard she was fighting to the end. She pulled off the impossible, then Gonzo leaned in and demanded, "So when do you plan to leave?" "Tomorrow." Both men went still. "Tomorrow? That's way too fast." But Tia didn't see the need to drag it out. They'd already faced each other and they both still had their duties waiting. She's made up her mind. She's already set to leave. Alexis admitted he couldn't match that kind of iron resolve. Gonzo shrugged and said they should spend the evening talking. Tia lit up. She hadn't had a conversation like this in ages. Alexis asked if it would be tough for her to stay awake. She burst out laughing. "No way, if anything, it'll give me strength," and in her head, she was already with Ed. "I can't stop wondering what face he'll make when he sees her again, shocked, thrilled, furious." None of that matters because she just wanted to see him. Even if it means ditching the comfort of friendship forever, it'll still be worth it. Alexis called her name, then demanded, "Tell me, do you still love me?" Tia locked eyes with him and the hesitation hit hard. Her cheeks flushed, she gave a small nod and just like that, yes. Alexis got it all clear as day, and she's ready to go to the very end, no matter what, just to see Ed again. Next morning, they stood shoulder to shoulder by the portal and Alexis blurted, "So this is where his sword was found?" Tia nodded. This was the last shred of him, the very spot closest to his presence. "That's why I'm casting the spell here," she said, and when Alexis suddenly added that he wanted to give her a gift, Tia froze, stunned. During the hunt for the holy sword, they dug up a pendant with healing powers and Tia froze. Could she really accept something like that? Alexis pushed the worry aside, saying he had Gonzo and Tia would be left alone. Then Gonzo leaned in with another surprise. Bracers crafted by one of the kingdom's best craftsmen, maybe not on Ed's level, but rock-solid dependable. Tia thanked them both, and at last she was ready. She fired back, "What does it even look like?" And then, like she couldn't believe it, she blurted, "Isn't that weird?" They both promised her, "You look amazing." Then Tia clutched her griffin tight, thanked him for everything, and told him, "Go back to the castle and take care of yourself." Then she rushed up to Alexis and Gonzo and wrapped them in a tight hug, thanking them with all her heart. These were the only people she could trust, her closest friends, her most loyal companions, always backing her and believing in her, and now she's walking away. But don't think goodbye is the final page, farewell is the move that lets everyone step forward, and Alexis even said, "Send our greetings to Edu." A sharp flash swallowed Tia, and the portal's power yanked her upward, straight into the space between worlds. Consciousness started slipping away. Ed, where was Ed? Then she felt it, something yanking her toward it. Light erupted around her, and sound, memories, and raw emotions swirled together until they formed one wild vortex. Around her, scenes snapped into view, two, ones she knew and ones that felt totally alien, and suddenly the world wasn't just around her, it was the one from her dreams. No, this wasn't enough. These were Che U Je Cyrillicletter 456 memories, and they slammed into her like a flood, like filthy mud that drags the soul down with it. Her soul was in full panic. This wasn't a dream at all. Those weren't just memories anymore. They felt alive, glowing in my head. She spotted Ed, and the way he poured out his life, his past, his future, all of himself, hit her like a punch, and she let out a scream as he vanished into that glowing light. But something felt terribly wrong. Her very presence repelled her, yanking her backward like an invisible force. Why? She gasped, panicking. Wasn't there enough mana after all those preparations? She was right there, so close. She grabbed Ed and pleaded, reach out. She shot her hand out as the whole world swallowed its light. Then crack, something tore through the dark, and Tia. She yanked her blade free, because now it was her move, her turn to grab the sword. He shattered the past, now the future was hers to give, and she tore through the air with one final scream, pouring every last drop of mana into it. Take me to him, to Ed. And then she spotted him. Ed stood right there in front of her, beside those giant doors. She couldn't process it. She found him at last, and then she screamed his name like it was a lifeline. Tears burned in his eyes, and Ed whipped around, totally thrown. He choked out, no, this can't be. Even as a joke, it was way too cruel. It can't be true. Tia can't be standing here. She bolted toward him and crushed him in a tight hug, then kept whispering again and again, I found you, Ed Frost. Her voice hit like sunshine, warm, real, and unmistakably hers. This wasn't some fake story, it was the real Tia, straight up. She shot Ed a heartfelt thank you, like she meant every word. Ed asked with worry burning in his voice if she'd finally calmed down, and she nodded, saying she was okay, then quietly apologized again for crying into his chest. She burst out laughing, so if she liked using his chest as a pillow, then let her, every single day. He tried to make a joke about rent, but the second he heard her whisper, he shut up. Again, that one word snapped him into stillness because she just remembered everything. Every single thing he'd done for her, for everyone. How he granted her wish that day. How he rewrote the past and the future. And in that moment, she finally understood why her heart had been begging to see him again. She thanked him again, but this time her voice trembled with sorrow, admitting that her help had rewired his future too, right when Ed cut in, snapping the moment and silencing her spiraling anxiety. He demanded to know where she got all this, and more importantly, how she even ended up here. Their faces were inches apart, way too close, and that sharp tension crackled in the air. Tia went quiet for a beat, then slammed her story into the air. Until Ed couldn't hold it in anymore, he exploded, shouting, where were you hiding your head? Did you spend 10 years hunting for me, and on top of that, did you risk teleporting through a broken channel on a gut feeling? One wrong spell and you could have vanished into nothing. Rage and panic hit him all at once, and he started trembling, then Tia. She shoved both hands against his face and yanked him to a stop. A grin sparked in her eyes. Wanna know why I did it? She demanded. Because you vanished without a word. She didn't give him a chance to answer. Then she caught up to him again and clung on like she'd never let go. He felt it right away. Her hand was shaking, just like his used to back then. She ditched everything, friends, home, her whole future for him, and all he could manage in return was one single sentence. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. Seeing her again feels like something he can't even wrap his mind around. Tia nodded because she felt it too. She slid into his arms and breathed him in, that same scent that instantly pulled him back, his warmth, right there again after all those years. Ed tried to speak, but the words got stuck. She just pressed closer and said, let me stay like this. He only managed, okay, and suddenly, boom, memories from before she arrived crashed into his head. Another version of herself, same soul, different timeline, only she stayed behind. After Ed got kicked out, the demon army swept in and burned everything. Alexis and Gonzo were gone, and she was left alone. But in this world, everything felt flipped on its head. Everyone was alive, and peace finally settled in. And you want to know who set it all in motion? Edu. She grabbed him and thanked him again, but he just shrugged and muttered, hey, don't make it all about me. This took every single person doing their part. Tia refused to let him downplay what he'd done, and she even called him everyone because his work truly mattered. He waved it all away again, insisting he was only doing it for himself. Tia eyed him hard like, yeah, sure, if that's what you're claiming. She burst out laughing and spun her gaze around. This place was nothing like the world she knew. So, what is this exactly? Ed exhaled. It's a long story, but if you want, I'll tell you. Tia didn't even blink. Then tell me everything. Just seconds ago, she was already shrieking in disbelief, banished from 100 worlds. And after all that, he tossed it all aside and started from zero. Who in the world could do something that brutal? Ed bowed his head, but Tia snapped, no, don't apologize. Then she thanked him again, pouring out sincerity and warmth like it meant everything. They held each other close, wordless but certain. Then Tia's voice cut through the silence. She'd already made her choice. She was going with him. She would journey to other worlds, right alongside him. He froze on the spot. Wait, is she with him? She nodded, basically saying, yeah, as long as you don't mind. He snapped back right away, insisting it had nothing to do with that, yet then he couldn't shake the shock. How on earth was this even possible? But does she really not want to come back? People are going to panic. Tia snapped, don't worry, I've already planned everything. I said goodbye to everyone. I even wanted to see Ed one last time before leaving, but now she finally understood. If she walked out on him again, she'd be stuck regretting it for the rest of her life. She makes the call herself, just like he did back then. She only wants one thing, to stay close, to travel side by side, and nothing else matters. If Ed won't do it, she'll leave, yet before she goes, she gazes at him with raw tenderness and whispers, can I be part of that desire of yours from long ago? Ed grinned and Tia shot back, what can I do? I'm a greedy woman. They both laughed, then Ed's smile faded because she could already feel the trouble coming. Jumping between worlds isn't his whole power. He doesn't even know if he can drag someone else along with him. Then Tia blurted out, wait, what is that glowing thing? It had been messing with her for ages, and now it was still shining like it refused to die down. She jabbed a finger at it, wait, that crystal sphere is the one he used to unlock his power, right? Ed nodded. Touch it and you'll gain a fresh ability. So then why the heck is it still glowing and working? Suddenly it hit him, what if Tia touches her? Tia blinked in shock, then nodded and reached out her hand and made contact. Sparks snapped through the air, light burst everywhere, and the sphere erupted with raw energy. Power roared to life from inside. Ed barked her name, pure worry spilling out, and Tia just stared at her hands in silence, like she couldn't bring herself to say a word. Her eyes widened with pure shock, and Ed leaned in, asking if she was okay. She nodded fast, saying, yeah, just, I'm stunned, before she reached out her hand. Come with me, she said, flashing a warm smile. Letters flickered inside her mind. She just unlocked a power like Ed's. And then he leaned in and demanded to know exactly what it was. She told him, if I hold your hand, we'll slip past the borders between worlds together. It was unreal, so this is what Exiled feels like. Warmth flooded her, soft and sweet. Now she could move with him. She shot her hands up, laughing in pure joy, then Ed went ice cold. Tia had just gotten the power of Exiled, no way that was a coincidence. From the very first moment, it was already locked in. He didn't outplay the system at all. He just followed the exact road that someone else had mapped for him. Every single choice, every brutal sacrifice, every hard-won struggle, it was all locked into a divine plan. So no, he didn't rewrite the past. He just marched along the road someone else had already picked for him. Then tell me, why did all that suffering have to happen in the first place? Maybe God isn't aiming to save just one world, maybe it's all of them, but why go this cruel route? And right then, Tia's voice snapped him back to reality. Her silence was deafening. What if something went terribly wrong? Did her power mess with his somehow? But then suddenly, it didn't matter anymore. He finally got it. God's plan, someone he'd never even met, stopped pulling at his mind because the end result, the future they'd set up, was better than anything he ever dared to wish for. And honestly, he had zero reason to complain. He flashed a warm smile, thanking her with his whole heart. They walked side by side. And honestly, that was already everything. He swallowed his doubts, respected her choice, and promised he'd keep leaning on her. Later, Tia erupted in joy at the thought of stepping through unknown worlds, and the excitement felt unreal. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was sure that together they could smash any challenge. They stood toe-to-toe with the door, hands locked tight like neither of them dared to let go. Ed leaned in and asked if she was ready to leave right now, but the mana wasn't surging that hard, so they could afford a quick breather before they pushed on. But Tia remembered how Ed once stormed down the same road, alone, over and over, with zero backup. She shook her head. No, she wasn't hurt at all. She was brimming with energy and ready to explode with excitement. Ed nodded. It's time, he said, then flashed a grin and reached out to her. Once more, he breathed, tilting his hand with a quiet reverence. Just don't let go, she swore it no matter what. For Ed, even saving the world still didn't feel like it earned her that kind of reward, because in this blinding white, cold emptiness, she wasn't just there. She was warm, real, and breathing. He couldn't let her go. He thought, this is too much. Then Tia called his name and her voice hit him like a spell, steady, bright, undeniable. In that moment she knew it for sure, this really was a gift beyond measure. And then she asked, "So, what kind of world is waiting for us next?" Ed didn't answer right away. Tia leaned in fast, her eyes blazing with pure anticipation. Side by side they pushed forward, only now Ed hoisted Tia in his arms like she was weightless, flying straight through the void. A brand new world burst open in front of them. "Welcome," he said. Tia spun her gaze around and the place looked asterisk way too familiar. "Is this really a different world?" she demanded, but Ed didn't even get the chance to answer before they got cut off. A rough, wary voice snapped, "What are you doing here?" In front of them stood a beast man, dog-like, but standing on two legs and fully dressed. Then he snarled, "Talk. This territory is under the animalance." Ed shot Tia a warning to stay quiet and said he'd take care of everything himself, then kept his voice polite to the creature, until he noticed it. Tia wasn't scared at all, she was trembling with pure excitement, and when Ed finally spun around, it was already too late. She lunged forward and crushed the animaliant in the tightest hug, then she squealed, "But you're such a cutie." She lit up like a kid seeing magic. Seriously, this fluffy little ball of cuteness was impossible to resist. "Who are you?" she burst out, grinning. Up close he looked even cuter, but the creature stumbled through asking what she thought it was doing. So Tia just kept giggling and said, "Little, soft, cute." Ed let out a heavy sigh, snapped, "Settle down, let him breathe. It's your first time seeing him, so don't just fling yourself into his arms." Tia looked annoyed but still grumbled, "Yeah, but he's so cute." Ed rubbed his temples and said, "Listen up carefully. That creature you just hugged, wait, hold up. He isn't some monster, he's a hero." Tia froze in place, blinked hard, and whispered, "Hero," then snapped, "Hero," still in total disbelief over what she'd just heard.